All right. Good evening, everybody. I declare this meeting open at 5:34 p.m. and I welcome councillors, management and members of the public attending tonight's meeting both in person and virtually. I begin, as we always do, by acknowledging that we are meeting on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we govern, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin, and pay respect to their elders past and present. We acknowledge and honour the unbroken spiritual, cultural and political connection they have maintained to this unique place for more than 2,000 generations. I also want to acknowledge that tonight we are proud to be holding the first council meeting for 2026, a year that holds great promise for our city. We come together with a shared mission of making Melbourne the best and fairest place to live, work, visit and do business. This year we want to lift the spirits of our city to new heights, to evoke the spirit of marvellous Melbourne, a city with ambition, a livable city, a prosperous city, a safe and clean city, a healthy city, a city that cares, a city where someone from any background, from anywhere, can live their absolute best life. This is the second year of the council term, of the 4-year council term. It should be a very, very productive year for the city of Melbourne. So, to everyone here, especially the councillors, the council officers, let's make it happen. This meeting is being streamed live and the recording will be published on Council's website by close of business tomorrow. The unconfirmed minutes of this meeting will also be available from the Council's website as soon as practicable. I request that all mobile phones be turned off or to silent for the duration of the meeting. Councillor Dr Ball has advised that she'll be arriving to the meeting a bit later in the evening, and apologies have been received from Councillor Camillo and Councillor Scott, but I believe Councillor Scott may be making endeavours to see if he can join us, so we will wait and see. Agenda item 2, disclosure of conflicts of interest. If any councillor has either a general or material conflict of interest as defined in the Local Government Act in relation to a matter to be considered by committee, please disclose the type and nature of the interest prior to consideration of the item. Moving on to agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. I call on a councillor to move a motion adopting the minutes of open meeting number 20 held on Tuesday the 2nd of December last year, 2025. Who would like to get us away? Deputy Lord Mayor, thank you for moving. Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Gladys Liu got in there. And all those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. Those minutes are adopted. Matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any matters arising from the minutes that people want to call out? No. In that case, we move on to submissions and items of correspondence. The following submissions have been received in accordance with Council's governance rules. In relation to agenda item 6.1, planning permit for Flinders Street, we have requests to speak from Jim Lau and from Luke Chamberlain from Tract, and we have an item of correspondence from Luke as well. In relation to agenda item 6.2, Racecourse Road Strategic Improvements Plan, we have requests to speak from Honorary Councillor Chris Thrum, and we have an item of correspondence from Chris Thrum and from Dr Kate Kennedy from the Kensington Association. In relation to agenda item 6.3, ministerial appointment of the Macaulay Advisory Committee, we have an item of correspondence from Dr Kate Kennedy as well. Agenda item 7.1, the NOM on AI, we have a request to speak from Chris Thrum and correspondence from Chris Thrum and Nick Sissons from Dame, who is well known to many of us. In relation to agenda item 7.2, we have, which is another NOM, on safeguarding Melbourne's civic statues, we have a request to speak and item of correspondence from Jake Land. Submitters will be invited to address the committee at the time of the relevant agenda item, I remind you. We now move on to agenda item 5, public questions. A 15-minute period will be provided at the beginning and end of this meeting for members of the public to ask questions. Members of the public may either submit public questions in writing or register to ask a question in person or live via audio link. I remind you all, questions should not be greater than 90 seconds in duration, and that this is not the time to make submissions. They are for when particular agenda items arise. As at 10 a.m. today, there had been 4 questions received, all of which will be asked in person, I'm very pleased to say. So I will now invite Bruce Sutherland to ask a question. Bruce, please make your way to the lectern. Great to see you back at Town Hall 2025. I remind you, please keep your question to no more than 90 seconds.
I will do so. Good evening, Lord Mayor and councillors. I'm here to talk about the Royal Park Golf Course. In 1983, the challenge of eliminating the errant golf balls from the 8th hole of the Royal Park Golf Course entering and damaging cars at the Royal Melbourne Hospital car park was achieved through the process of consultation between the Melbourne City Council and Royal Park Golf Course stakeholders. The result included repositioning the tee together with 2 long screens alongside the tee. The problem was solved. In early 2000s, the screen corroded, resulting in large gaping holes through which errant golf balls once again entered the Royal Melbourne Hospital car park. In 2019, the net was completely replaced by a significantly higher fence, and to my knowledge, there has been no subsequent damage to cars or people. In May 2025, with almost no consultation, the tee position was moved forward to a temporary position at the front of the green. This reopens the possibility of errant golf balls again being a hazard to the public. The temporary tee area is unsightly, poorly managed, and almost impossible to put tees into it. This ruins the experience of playing this iconic hole. There is now a 10-month-old impasse on resolving the situation. So my question today, Lord Mayor, is on behalf of the 4 golf clubs who are based at Royal Park Golf Course, I'm asking that a stakeholder meeting with the clubs and the Melbourne City Council is convened as soon as possible so the decision can be made and implemented that works effectively for us all. And will certainly lift the spirits, as you asked earlier.
Thank you, Bruce. I invite you to remain at the lectern, and I look to a councillor to respond. Councillor Gladys Liu. Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Bruce, for your question. I've spoken with officers, and I understand that last year, Council completed a safety risk assessment following reports of golf balls leaving the course near hole 8 and entering the car park and road area. Now, as a temporary safety measure, the tee at hole 8 was relocated to reduce the risk to park users and the wider community. Council also discussed these changes with all Royal Park Golf Clubs, including presidents of the Royal Park Golf Club, the Royal Park Veterans Golf Club, and the Royal Park Ladies Golf Club. Now, the 6-month review period for this change ended in January 2026. During this time, no further safety incidents have been reported. Council is aware that the tee surface at hole 8 has hardened over time, and plans are underway to improve irrigation in this area, as well as improvements to the immediate landscaping and seating. Now, once plans and timelines are confirmed, they will be shared with the golf clubs. I just want you to be reassured that safety will continue to be monitored over the next 6 months while Council considers the best long-term options for Hole 8, balancing the needs of golfers, park users, and the broader Royal Park community. And once again, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Lew. I might just add to your comments by saying that I'm very familiar with the Royal Park golf course, and I think it is a marvellous gift of a course that we have here in our city. Peter Thompson designed, the great Peter Thompson. It's not a long course, but it's designed so cleverly. It's very challenging. And as you said, it's been there from the 1980s. I think the 8th is a classic hole, and the changes to the tee box, I'll be really upfront, I don't think they're satisfactory, particularly with the new clubs. If you've got a good drive on you, if you've got a good whack of the ball, people can easily drive onto Poplar Avenue there, and it's created a new hazard. So that's not satisfactory. So good to hear from you, Councillor Lew, that there's a review underway. I can assure you that common sense will ultimately prevail here, and we don't want to ruin what is a beautifully designed golf course. There's a cyclone fence there. Maybe some, updates could be made to the cyclone fence that would potentially minimise the risk to the nearby car park, but would allow for the reinstatement of the original tee box back on in its original location, and thus reinstate the hole to its former glory. But we need to investigate other options as well, of which I'm sure there are a number, but we're going through that process. But please know that here at Town Hall there's a lot of sympathy for the point you're putting, Bruce.
I appreciate that, Councillor. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm a little surprised at some of your comments because I'm here as a request of the 4 presidents of the golf club. So it seems to me there's some communication collapse. But thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. I now invite Mary Lou Howie to ask her question.
Good evening, Lord Mayor and councillors. My question to council is, what are you going to do about it? In a recent communication between a big market trader, who happens to be sitting here, and the Lord Mayor, dated 22nd of January, you made it clear, Lord Mayor, that you do not want us to bring Queen Victoria Market issues that concern operations and viability directly before council. You want us to take them to the board of the council's company that manages the market, QVMPL. The reality is we raise these thorny issues in council out of utter frustration because the managing company, QVMPL, is unresponsive, obdurate, and evasive when dealing with our concerns. Their assumption appears to be that the traders in the market community are stupid. The reality is the market can survive without the company, but the market cannot survive without its traders and customers. The company is a private subsidiary of the City of Melbourne, with the council its only shareholder, and with the council the ultimate authority. As no joy is found with the company, we are therefore forced to bring the issues before you, Lord Mayor, councillors, and the public, so that you are fully aware of the failure of the board to manage market issues. The question is, what are you going to do about it?
Look, thank you, Mary Lou, and let me put very clearly on the record that I welcome questions in this forum on any topic and any matter in the City of Melbourne. Our democracy demands that this is a place where people can raise
your
these
letter suggests
sort of
otherwise.
questions. The letter that you're referring to, and I don't have it in front of me, but I suspect it might have made a point about that in the first instance, the day-to-day management of QVM matters is a matter for the QVM management team and the QVM board. And at the City of Melbourne, we are the owners of the market, but we leave day-to-day management issues to the management of the QVM. I apologise if that response was interpreted as indicating, or you felt that it indicated some lack of caring. It certainly didn't. It was just meant to be a statement of how the QVM market is set up and designed to operate. I might invite Alison Leighton, our CEO, to add to that, because I know she has a keen interest in the QVM and the governance arrangements there.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for your question, Mary Lou, and also for your questions, Fana. I think the Lord Mayor has articulated it very well in the sense that Council are very keenly focused on the market and how to position the market for success moving forward as the solely owned shareholder. As a sole shareholder, I should say. And so whilst we do seek to follow the governance framework that's been put in place with respect to the board and the role of the board, there really isn't any issue that's too small that councillors wouldn't involve themselves in. And similarly, myself as CEO, you would know that I have made myself available many, many times to understand issues as they're experienced by the traders as well, to support the council in supporting the board to fulfil its duties. So that's probably all I'll say at this point, other than to say I'm very happy, again, to spend time understanding the issues, where they're at the moment, and whether there are further things that the city and council can do to support the market and traders, as well as to fulfil our requirements under the governance framework that's been put in place.
The point I was making is just it's not working.
All right. Thank you for your question this evening, Mary Lou. We now move on to Chris Truman, who requested the opportunity to ask a question. Great to see you at Town Hall, Chris. Just a reminder to please keep your question to 90 seconds in duration.
Thank you very much. Councillors, thank you for the opportunity to present an idea to you on behalf of Southbank 3006 that will bring credit to Council for implementing an excellent safety measure for pedestrians and bike riders in Southbank. Rather than just reread my question, which you all received in an email from me yesterday, with my suggestion to install a flat-top raised pedestrian crossing across the access road to the Southeastern Freeway beside the Kingsway overpass. I'll just make a few extra comments rather than just repeat the words I've already written. The submission I made included a location diagram and 2 photos of how the road looks at the moment, now that the eastern footpath beside the residential block built beside the Boyd has been resurfaced. 2 other photos show how safety would be greatly improved at minimum cost to make the road crossing from beside the Boyd Centre to the busy tram stop under Kingsway at City Road. For added safety, the access road should be posted as 30 kilometres an hour at City Road entrance. The section of road between City Road and Kavanagh Street is a one-way road, and it appears to be listed as being under City of Melbourne control. This means that any change to traffic management should be much easier to implement, though I'm quite sure that because it also serves an access road to CityLink, other authorities might want to have their say too. I ask councillors to give their support to this safety measure and ask officers to consult with Southbank 3006, the community and other relevant authorities to implement this measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. It's a great question and a great bit of local work by you there. I might invite Rick Quasek, our Head of Infrastructure, to respond, and I might add something to that.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Chris, for the question. You'll be pleased to know that the City of Melbourne are doing some works within the City Road Master Plan, and one of those is to implement a crossing between on City Road between Kingsway and Boyd Park, and that is to try and address some of the challenges of that very busy road and accessing that area. In relation to the implementation of traffic control devices, they are under the control of Department of Transport and Planning. And so while we might have some say in the way we put that to the Department of Transport, they have the final say on crossings and the implementation of those crossings. In relation to, in your question, you mentioned around the potential for 30-kilometre speed limits. The Victorian Government recently undertook a revised speed zoning policy, which was released in August 2025. So under the updated policy, lower speed limits can be considered in specific road environments. So we would need to look to the Department of Transport about assessing those locations, and we're undertaking a study at the moment, and then implementing those should it be considered appropriate by Department of Transport. Again, speed traffic control devices are actually under the control of Department of Transport. We would be looking to them for recommendation on the speed in those areas. I guess just to finally say, we're undertaking those investigations at the moment, and we'll certainly be coming back to you and Residents 3006 with the outcome of those investigations, and we can talk through those outcomes.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Look, I would just add to that by saying thank you, Chris, for bringing this matter to this forum. I agree this is an absolute must-do project for the City of Melbourne. Whether it's in the exact configuration that you're suggesting here, I think we need to get our traffic management experts to give us advice on. But the problem is one that absolutely must be addressed. You see people dashing across that Kingsway slip lane in the mornings to get to the tram stop there. People don't realise it's one of the busiest tram stops in Melbourne because, thousands of people who live down in Melbourne Square or along Kavanagh Street or to the west on City Road, they make their way into the city at that tram stop, and they're dashing across that slip lane at the moment, and it's very, very dangerous, very dangerous. And so it needs to be fixed. What the proposal you've brought to us is the best idea I've seen yet, but obviously the team will have a look at that and we will get action on it. All right, thank you. The next question, the time allocated for question time has now lapsed, but the good news is that we have a further 15 minutes allocated for questions at the conclusion of the main agenda items. So on that note, we will move on to reports from management. The first of those is in the planning portfolio. So I call on Deputy Lord Mayor Rashina Campbell to assume the role of Chair of this meeting in relation to reports where Council exercises its responsibility under the Planning and Environment Act.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. There is one report from management under this item, agenda item 6.1, Planning Permit Application TP 2023-161/A 376 to 388 Flinders Street, Melbourne. Would councillors like a presentation on this item? No? In that case, I am going to move to our submitters. I will first call on Jim Lau, who has requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Jim, I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Good evening, Lord Mayor, councillors. My name is Jim. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Country Head for Australia for Wintai. Wintai was established in 1955 as a garment manufacturer. In 1963, we expanded into real estate. Today, we undertake developments in various parts of the world, including Singapore, Hong Kong, China, Malaysia, Japan, UK, and right here in Australia. Other than the subject site along Flinders Street and Trelstock Place, we also own 464 St Kilda Road, which we intend to develop into a 400-unit apartment currently working with Cox Architects, and it's in planning stage. We also own several other assets in New South Wales, data centres, as well as in Victoria. In Melbourne, we also operate Lanson Place Parliament Gardens. That's a 5-star hotel, which we recently undertook the redevelopment, having Denton Corkle Marshall as the architect and Conrad and Partners. That building, most of you will know, is a Salvation Army printing works, which is now converted into a luxury hotel. Wing Tai has a strong track record in undertaking heritage and conservation projects, including our own headquarters in Singapore, Central Crossing in Hong Kong, which is designed by Foster's and Associates. We also recently won an international design competition in Beijing to redo a master plan for a formal steel manufacturing plant, repurposing it into an exhibition and conference complex. Our vision when we acquired 380 Flinders Street was to build a Grade A office facing the Yarra River, and that will be home to our head office in Australia. Unfortunately, due to the shape of the site on its own, we can't achieve a Grade A office, and the views to the north is severely impaired due to the shared boundary. So when the opportunity came up to acquire the adjacent site in 2023, we actually paid a premium to acquire the site. This will ensure that we're able to achieve a Grade A floor plate, which I think most of you will know would be a minimum of 1,000 square meters. As you're aware, the inflation has gone crazy since COVID. It is still extremely high at the moment. This year is expected to ease, but it's currently cheaper for you to go and buy a building, an office building in Melbourne, than to build one. We're not purely driven by commercial. This is a vision that we had in the past, which we intend to carry through, and we want to realize that by developing it into a Grade A office with a fantastic address. We remain committed to the state of Victoria. Last year, just for the subject property, we paid $2 million, over $2 million in taxes. We are hoping that we will get a favourable conclusion for this DA, and we will be able to appoint a builder so that we can come to realise the vision that we had originally. We fully have faith in the City of Melbourne, the jobs that it will create, and we believe that upon the completion of this building, it will activate the laneway and strengthen the link between Flinders Lane to Flinders Street and vice versa. To sum it up,
Jim, I know that you're doing this, but I'll just invite you to conclude your remarks.
Sure. Okay, I'll finish off by saying that, any further reduction to that floor plate will basically render the project unfeasible, and we simply can't achieve a Grade A product. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Did councillors have any questions? No, thank you very much. I now call on Luke Chamberlain from Tract. Luke, I know you already know this, but I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you indeed, Deputy Lord Mayor, and good evening, councillors. Luke Chamberlain is my name, Town Planning Consultant from Tract. It's a great privilege and an honour to be representing Wing Tai as our client. We've been working with Wing Tai for several years now, and we commend the calibre of this developer to you. We're here tonight because a consideration for an amendment to an existing planning permit is before you. We thank the officers for their contribution and preparation of a comprehensive report, and we thank them for a long period of collaboration that extends back several years now. Our client has a very clear vision for the site, and it's got a very clear commitment to collaboration. We voluntarily agreed to Council's suggestion to participate in a Melbourne Design Review panel process with the original application. There was a period of 11 months between the issuing of that report and for us to resubmit. Such was the commitment to changes and an iterative design process with the city. Now, we're the first to agree and admit that the contribution that the City of Melbourne made to that has had a meaningful contribution to the improvement of the original design. This application now is incredibly important to our client in regaining efficiencies to the floor plate. It is our very firm view that this application will make a wonderful contribution to this city block. the opening remarks of the Deputy Lord Mayor certainly caught my attention when he spoke about safety, the city prospering, cleanliness. This is a city block in absolute dire need for investment. It's my great concern that if the condition that we're inviting the councillors to consider an alternative resolution on tonight is retained, that our client won't be able to proceed as planned. To clarify, we are seeking and inviting council tonight to consider an alternative resolution to that put forward by the officers, which would be through the deletion of the condition that relates to a further setback of the floor plate at the upper levels. This setback relates to Tavistock Place above the substation. It's important that we note that the substation will remain free of development above it for approximately 66% of its airspace. The cantilever that's being proposed in this amendment only amounts to approximately 34% over the building. Council's heritage policy has been tested. Our heritage consultant has guided us right throughout and is 100% supportive of the proposal. It's also important for him to point out that we did make adjustments to that setback throughout the course of this latest application. I absolutely commend it to you with great conviction and respectfully request that you give due consideration to an alternative resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luke. Did councillors have any questions? No. I had a question for management following your submission, Luke, so you're very welcome to take your seat for now. I don't know if I'm addressing this to you, Julian, or Nick, but my question is, what is management's response to the alternate proposal put by Tract, the removal, I believe it's condition 1I, concerning the setback, and what would management's advice be about that in particular, the consequences for Council's heritage policy and the Melbourne planning scheme?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and through you, I'll just get my presentation up to one of the slides which sort of speaks to this issue. Look, Council's heritage policy requires that additions to significant places are not built over or extend into the airspace directly above the front or principal part of the building. Given the nature of this site and its location, whilst we acknowledge it isn't for the full extent of the heritage building, it does present over the significant heritage building in a prominent location of the site. Additions should be recessive and the prominence and legibility of the heritage building should be retained. I'll just get you to slip back one slide for me. This is a render of the proposal. What it depicts is that overhang and cantilever with the pillars into the heritage building, which officers say does diminish that heritage significance of the building and doesn't comply with heritage policy. So our recommendation to council is that that be set back.
Thank you. And then we've had a submission from Tract put very forcefully that, and we've heard this as well from Jim, that the development will no longer be feasible. Could you remind the committee about the role of assessing feasibility in the context of planning decisions of this nature?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Look, feasibility isn't a consideration under the planning scheme. We're required to assess the planning merits of the application as per the policies within the planning scheme, and that's not one of the considerations.
Thank you. I believe there's a question from Councillor Rouse and Councillor Liu. Over to you, Councillor Rouse.
If council tonight approved the amendment, i.e. the building was built as is with the overhang through the roof, which is not the recommendation as I'm hearing it, how would that change future decisions by council, i.e. would that set a precedence, or is every individual decision judged on its own merit and precedence is not considered?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Every application is considered on its own merit, so I wouldn't say it would create a precedence necessarily. We're required to assess an application based on what's before us in the policy. So,
and in an application, would it be normal for someone to reference previous decisions that would be similar, or whilst you're correct, it might not set a precedence, would it present an argument as to why someone should or should not follow heritage overlays?
Yes, that's definitely something that would be put to us in future cases.
To you, Councillor Liu.
Thanks. You talk about the heritage, right? And you're saying, well, we don't want anything built on top of it because I guess it's no heritage. It diminishes the site and everything. But then I would argue then also the site previously never had anything above it anyway. So we never really dealt with, I guess, the airspace or anything. So what difference is it to have, right?
Thank you, Councillor. The policy within the planning scheme, the heritage policy, states that
R1, right?
Our heritage policy within the Melbourne planning scheme.
Yep.
That states that, and I'll read it out. Additions to significant places are not built over or extend into the airspace directly above the front or principal part of the building.
All right. So 100% of it, not just a partial of it or anything, just anything above it.
Yes.
Could you put that on our portfolio to have the discussion and everything? That's another thing to add on to the thing. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Were there any other questions from councillors? No? All right. Thank you so much. I am now going to ask for a motion to be put on the screen. I am going to move that motion and I'm seeking a seconder. Thank you. I'm now going to speak to that motion. Can I begin by thanking our submitters, Luke and Tract? You do wonderful work and we're very grateful for the submission that you've put before us tonight. And Jim, can I acknowledge the appreciation of the city for your ongoing investment. It is a wonderful thing for Melbourne and very much consistent with what we aspire for the city. I have the job, though, in the context of the planning portfolio of considering this particular application. The application before us seeks to amend an existing planning permit, TP 2023-161, in particular to include and develop the land that's been acquired at 11 to 27 Tavistock Place. That includes extending the basement below an existing heritage substation and also provides for, as you've seen tonight, built form above the existing heritage substation, which would extend and be in addition to that approved development. The owner and applicant are Wincrown Proprietary Limited, represented by Track Consultants. The estimated cost of the amended development is $59 million. The existing planning permit was granted for an 18-storey mixed-use building, including retail and offices. This new application, which introduces new land, now introduces the consideration of Heritage Overlay 1249, and that Heritage Overlay protects a substation, which is graded significant. I note that although this application was put out for public notice, no objections have been received. So the key issue before us tonight is consideration of whether this development, in particular on the new land, delivers an appropriate built form and heritage response, having regard to Council's policies, the Melbourne Planning Scheme, and the controls. Throughout this application process, our officers have raised concerns about the built form over the heritage substation being an unacceptable outcome. I'm very grateful to our officers and the applicant, who I understand have spent a considerable amount of time speaking, including on site, seeing what could be achieved to satisfy the needs of the applicant. Unfortunately, the proposal before us tonight still contains a key contravention of the heritage policy in the presence of built form within the airspace directly above the heritage substation and the associated impacts on heritage significance. The assessment of that is set out in detail in our delegate report, but in particular, the role before us tonight is balancing that heritage policy and the appropriateness of the addition over Tavistock Place, in particular the clearance and the cantilever, and the recommendation before us from management tonight is that the amendment sought by the applicant should be supported, but subject to conditions, including an increased setback in the built form. You've heard tonight from the applicant the desire or the request that an alternate proposal be considered, that is that the setback condition, condition 1I, be changed. And you've also heard the response from management in respect of that. It's worth making it very clear that Council's heritage policy and the planning scheme specifically requires that additions to a significant or contributory building do not build over or extend into the airspace directly above the front or principal part of the building. You've also heard tonight about the feasibility of the development if that condition is included, and it is worth reminding the committee that this council's responsibility is to ensure that the development aligns with the objectives and policies of the Melbourne Planning Scheme, and that does include protection and respectful integration of heritage places. Of course, and we have said this many times, we are a council that very much invites further investment in the city. That is why a permit has already issued for an 18-storey mixed-use office and retail building, and that is why the recommendation before management tonight is that the amendment sought also be granted, but subject to conditions. Because, of course, our role is striking that balance between the development sought by the applicant, the Melbourne Planning Scheme, and the heritage overlay that applies to this site. And, of course, making sure that the outcomes are consistent with good heritage outcomes. I did want to take some time, though, to speak about this proposal and the merits of it. In particular, we are delighted that it retains and incorporates the heritage substation. That strongly aligns with our planning policy objective to encourage adaptive reuse of heritage places as an alternative to demolition. And I also want to note the integration of a significant local heritage asset into a renewed mixed-use development. That's a wonderful thing. And is very much, I think, going to be appreciated by the people of Melbourne. And of course, this is a pocket of our city with really high strategic values. It is a key part of our city, and we are very excited by the possibility of new activity here while retaining that heritage asset. I wanted to speak briefly about the conditioning closing and what it does. Importantly, it ensures an appropriate transition between the heritage building and the addition, keeping the new form recessive, subservient, and importantly, in this heritage context, clearly distinguishable. Without this condition, the proposal would detract from the heritage presentation to the street. It would diminish the cultural significance of the site. I have heard loud and clear from the submitters tonight. I want to thank Tract for their excellent work. I want to thank the applicant for its investment, and I certainly hope that if this motion passes tonight that we will see development on that site. It is certainly something that I would welcome. I also want to thank our officers who I know have worked very hard in relation to both the original permit and this amended permit application. So to Nick, Julian, Evan and your team, thank you very, very much. Over to you, Councillor Leigh Lewis, seconder.
Sure, thank you. I echo everything you say, and I do hope we do see development. As you said, the area is, I walk past it every time, and also the alleyways, and also I guess the site could really be bit of love and care, and also investment. We do have to adhere to our heritage policy. And I guess this gave me some insight into some thinking as well, because my view has always been heritage is great and we need to do everything we can to protect it, but at the same time, that cannot foreshadow development. And if we didn't have any developments in the city, we wouldn't have trams, we wouldn't have buildings, we wouldn't even have this particular building. And so it has to be complement. And I do hope that, that's something that's a food for thought for ourselves to have a think about, because I think feedback from yourself and also dealing with every application gives us an idea. And, that's where one of the things I really love to hear is just, what is the industry actually thinking? What are the things that we could actually be helping? But in this particular instance, I guess, it does, we do have a particular heritage policy. I do think it's wise to revisit that and have a look at what is it to adapt to what is contemporary. And one of your cases, I think, is one of those things that we should be particularly looking at. Yes, we do. I love heritage as well, and everyone does. There's nobody who can't say. But if it means that, we also want investment. We want jobs. We want a better city. We want living. We want more office spaces to accommodate everything people. And so, what is the price to pay for that? And I really hope that there is a striking balance. I really do hope that you will see it being developed. Really, really love to see it. But at the same time, we need to, I guess, back our officers on this and our policy. But then again, that's something that we need to also look within ourselves. So happy to support the motion that's on the screen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Leilu. Would other councillors like to speak to the motion? No? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise your hands? That has passed unanimously. And with that, I declare the motion carried and I call on the Lord Mayor to resume the role of Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. The next agenda item before us is 6.2, Racecourse Road Strategic Improvement Plan Implementation Update. Would councillors like a presentation on this agenda item? No, I think this is a long-term planning project which is well understood. I will now call on Chris Thrum, who has requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Welcome to Town Hall, back to Town Hall, Chris. A gentle reminder that's not needed that you are to speak for no more than 3 minutes. And great to see you back at Town Hall for 2026.
See you, Lord Mayor. I've got a slide that I want to have put up on the screen. Have you got that? Okay. Thank you, Lord Mayor, Nick Rees, councillors, management team, men and women of Old Melbourne Town. First start off so they recognise that we're on Wurundjeri country. I respect elders past and present. Melbourne Town Hall sits on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. We're looking at agenda item 6.2, Racecourse Road Strategic Improvements Plan Implementation Update. I want to thank Tim Clark. I know Tim's got a measured approach to how this is going. I want to thank Joe Cannington, Evan Council, and I'd like to thank the CEO, Alison Layton, too, with the work that she's doing in regards to this. If we look at the photograph up there, that's a horse racing transport truck that's driven on the slip lane on Racecourse Road, and it's driving onto Smithfield Road. There's a point of contention in regards to the RRSIP, and that is that we should not, under any circumstance, remove that slip lane. That slip lane is critical for the safe transportation of race horses to Flemington on many days of the week. I want to focus on the character, the identity, the status of Racecourse Road. Now, this was a British settlement, and they called that road Racecourse Road for a reason. It's the road to the racecourse. All right. Melbourne is the Melbourne Cup. That's indisputable. Melbourne's the only city that has a public holiday for a horse race. That's how good Melbourne is. You can't get better than that. In many ways, Melbourne's a more Irish city than an Irish city. I mean, having a holiday for a horse race is amazing. Sir Henry Berkeley, the Governor of Victoria, on the 11th of April 1860 at the inaugural dinner of the Royal Society of Victoria, in his speech he noted that Melbourne has championed horse races to prove the thoroughbred fitness of the champion racehorses of Victoria. Spring Racing Carnival is a highlight of the social and sporting calendar of Melbourne. Minister Carbines in 2025 stated that the racing industry provides $34 billion to the Victorian economy and $35,000 of jobs per year. That slip lane ensures the safe transportation of race horses to Flemington. that is not a place to put a bike lane. If you put a bike lane there, you only have one lane for the horse transport trucks to turn. They'll be turning in front of cyclists. That creates a dangerous, dangerous situation. We need a balance here. We've got to weigh things up. We've got to have perspective. Lord Mayor mentioned about the fact that in the long run, we need to have a common sense approach. And I'm sure that the civil engineers can work out a solution where they can find a better place for the bikes to travel on that section of Racecourse Road.
Chris, your time has elapsed. Thank you for your submission, sharing your insights and a little bit of racing history, and include a bit of Victorian history as well.
Thank you.
All right. I will now request that... Councillor David Griffiths.
I might ask a question of management, if I can, directly related to the presentation that Chris just made about the slip lane, and perhaps this is one that needs to be taken on notice, or I accept that. But my reading of Racecourse Road is that the slip lane is on the other side of the Smithfield Road and not the photo that was just shown to us there, which I think is just a regular turn, whereas the slip lane is on the other side of Smithfield, where effectively there's a island where pedestrians can stand before another line of turning traffic can come around the corner, effectively from Smithfield into Racecourse.
Thanks, Councillor Griffiths, and
thanks,
you as
Evan
Chair,
Council.
Lord Mayor. Just to support that question, we will take that on notice and have a more detailed look, and we'll contact Chris if necessary to clarify the question and get to the bottom of that issue.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, for that detailed question about the positioning of the slip lane. All right. I'm going to now invite or request that a motion be put on the screen. That is the one, and I am going to move that motion through my infrastructure and transport portfolio responsibilities, and looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, somebody who knows Racecourse Road very well indeed. I am pleased to be moving this motion this evening on what is a really important road in our municipality. Racecourse Road sits at the intersection of state infrastructure and local community life, and it is a road which has many components to it. It carries 30,000 cars a day. It's a busy tram line as well. It's a long and busy high street. It has parks. It has a brilliant bowls club. It's got everything. And that makes it quite a complex exercise to establish the Racecourse Road Strategic Improvements Plan. But that's what we are endeavouring to do, and that's what this update does update us on. We are working closely with the City of Moonee Valley and the state to make sure that this corridor functions not just as a road, but as a place that reflects the character and needs of the communities around it. That means it needs to be a corridor that prioritises people. We want to green the street. We want to create an active and vibrant street as well. We want to support walking and riding. We want to encourage public transport, and we want people to consider all modes of transport. Now that the Westgate Tunnel has opened, we need to see a movement and place assessment undertaken that will allow us to better understand and align the transport function along this corridor with community life. I also note that the new G-Class trams are in operation, and so we will need new tram stops along Racecourse Road to accommodate those fabulous new trams on our streets. Our focus remains on safer streets, better public transport, greener public space, and a racecourse road that supports local business and neighbourhood connection over the longer term. This is a bit of a complexitron of different levels of government and different government agencies, and sadly, that means things are going to take time. But here at Melbourne Town Hall, we are absolutely committed to keeping the pressure on, particularly, I'm going to say, on the state government to ensure that we get the investment that's needed to realise the vision along Racecourse Road. More broadly, I do wonder if it is time to reconsider the boundaries between the City of Melbourne and the City of Moonee Valley. At the moment, Racecourse Road is bisected by that boundary. And, I do wonder if the community is best served by having the boundary go right down the middle of the road. It does jump at various points. So some parts of the road, Moonee Valley has the whole part of Racecourse Road. Other parts at the east end, the City of Melbourne has the whole part of the road. And other parts along Racecourse Road, the boundary goes right down the middle. Now, to my mind, that just adds more complexity to the situation. And I do wonder if we were to bring the whole of Racecourse Road under the auspice of one single council, whether that might lead to better outcomes. I do think that Racecourse Road High Street could be one of the best high streets in Melbourne. Some of the African restaurants in particular and some of the other dining restaurants and butcher shops, they're fabulous. And I just can't help but feel that Racecourse Road is not being all that it could be. And I do wonder that if it was brought under the auspice of one council and not split between two, there'd be less buck parking, less uncertainty about who's accountable, who's responsible, and we'd get a better outcome for the community that need and love Racecourse Road and all the services that the road provides to the community. So I leave that idea there, and I hope that it'll be the subject of further discussion. For tonight's purposes, I do commend this motion and report to councillors, and I look forward to us getting on to deliver a better Racecourse Road under the Racecourse Road Strategic Improvements Plan implementation update. Over to you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm obviously happy to be seconding this motion, and while it might be a relatively simple matter of noting the update, obviously within that update there's a large amount of work that has been happening, and I want to add my thanks to the people who have been undertaking that work, both the City of Melbourne officers, but also yourself, Lord Mayor, as is noted in the key considerations section of the documents before us tonight. You wrote to the Ministers of Transport Infrastructure and Road Safety, and the CEO as well wrote the Secretary of the Department of Transport and Planning, and as a result of that, the Department of Transport and Planning has agreed to undertake a movement and place assessment of Racecourse Road, and that really is going to be an important step in the processes of aligning both the two municipalities and the state government in what is, as you've described, as another part of Kensington, as another complexitron in Kensington. But you're absolutely right. We see that these changes that need to occur down Racecourse Road have a large number of different organisations and government organisations concerned with them. I take on board, Lord Mayor, your thoughts on the boundaries there, and note as much for interest as anything else that when I first moved to Flemington in 1996, that where I moved to in Flemington was then part of the City of Melbourne, and that boundary changes since then have moved that into Moonee Valley. So it's not unprecedented for those boundaries to be looked at over time. And certainly when we think about what that shopping strip could be, it would be fantastic to see some of the next level things occurring, fantastic as it has been, that there's been a number of major renovations to some of the shops down there recently. And noting as well that one of the large things which is occurring in the changes to Racecourse Road at the moment, as you touched on, is the G-Class trams coming on board. gives me an opportunity to speak about the 57 tram route, my spirit animal, as I like to say, and I know a space that is important to Chris as well, and thank him for his submission, and why we really would love to see the new tram stops accompanying those trams to be of the highest quality, coming in as quickly as possible. It is fantastic that we finally got that new fleet of trams coming, according to the papers in front of us, around March, and that those trams in and of themselves will be more accessible and have a much greater capacity. That's something which is going to be really great for the people who live in Kensington and right along that 57 tram route. So with those notes, I do thank everyone who's been part of the good work that has led us this far to the implementation of the Racecourse Road Strategic Improvements Plan, and look forward to further updates in the future.
Thank you very much, Councillor Griffiths, and thank you for your long-standing interest in Racecourse Road and all the issues and opportunities associated with that important corridor. Would any of the councillors like to speak to this motion? No, in that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. We move on to agenda item 6.3, ministerial appointment of the Macaulay Advisory Committee. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I would request a brief presentation.
Certainly, Deputy Lord Mayor. I invite Joe Cannington to present to us on this matter.
Good evening, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor and councillors. This evening we're presenting with you an update on the Macaulay Structure Plan Advisory Committee and outlining what that means for the future planning framework of Macaulay. If I can just go to the next slide, please. On December 22nd, 2025, so just a couple of months ago, the Minister for Planning formally appointed the Macaulay Structure Plan Advisory Committee. This committee was established to advise the Minister on the suitability of the future use of development in Macaulay, and it represents a shift from Council's previous amendment pathway that creates a more targeted, state-led process for resolving the remaining planning issues in the precinct. The committee will begin with a directions hearing in February, followed by a full public hearing in April of this year. Importantly, the committee's scope is significantly limited to a terms of reference. The main difference between what went through Council in December last year and what is being proposed through this process is changes to the mandatory affordable housing requirements not being included. This doesn't exclude, though, the broader consideration of affordable housing. The state is proposing to introduce an updated planning controls through this process, which includes the precinct zone and the built form overlay. These are largely based on the exhibited controls that we took through Council last year, and they reflect the committee's restrictions in the terms of reference for a more streamlined planning control. Following the appointment of the Minister, following this appointment, the Minister has also requested that Council therefore pause Amendment 417 while this different and separate planning process occurs. In response to that, the Lord Mayor has written back to the Minister requesting that we will consider that, and that's why we're here tonight, to consider the policy neutral translation of these planning controls, with the request that Council undertakes that additional work with the review of the controls that are being proposed by the state. The letter also requested some efficiencies to include what's currently happening as a separate process to consider the public acquisition overlay. So this will streamline two processes into one. Just the next slide, please. This slide sets out how the processes change. So what will happen is the Minister's new pathway then has an intervention at the moment. Council had already completed several steps in the public exhibition to achieve the outcome on the 2nd of December. But now what we're doing is, instead of moving through a council-led process, this will be a state-led process where we move straight to an advisory committee. The Minister appointing this has a difference in process. but the overall considerations will be very similar. In practical terms, this again shifts from this council-led process to a minister-led process. On balance, we've really considered this advice. We think that the new process offers benefits to council and the community, including faster resolution of a very long-term planning controls for Macaulay, and there's potential to progress on a range of issues. It also introduces new contemporary planning controls, which we know that we'll need to update in the future. There is risk that some of the outcomes sought by council will not be translated like for like, so council has requested update to the terms of reference to ensure that that scope is considered. Overall, it's considered practical and reasonable for council to pause progressing this amendment due to the appointment of this new committee. Progressing both processes concurrently would duplicate resources and potentially be inefficient, and management will continue to represent the outcomes sought by the structure plan of 2021 with this version in mind. I'm happy now to answer any questions from that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that, Joe. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. And thank you, Joe, for that very helpful presentation. We have received a submission from the Kensington Residents Association that raises some concerns about this process and whether third parties like the members of the Kensington Residents Association will be shut out of this process. Does management have a view about that?
I think the important process is now that council no longer have kind of control of the process. It's now sitting with the minister. So we see real value in transparency of this difference in process. We think that we would support, and there's benefit in advocating for new voices to be heard through this process in the event that there are new people that weren't party to the previous process because they were comfortable with that. If now this is new information, so we would support further voices being heard through this process.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Lelou.
Thanks. So in terms of, for example, affordable housing, right? So state governments have pretty much said, you know, not including it. But yet we are kind of, sorry, let me rephrase that. Given the position that state governments now cover and affordable housing and others are housing as a general is actually a state government issue. You shouldn't be on burden of, I guess, local government because we don't have the resource and everything. So is it worthwhile for the City of Melbourne then actually to reflect and have a look at our own affordable housing? Because if state government's saying, no, you know, no affordable housing is needed, yet we push for affordable housing, then it's kind of, we are going at it alone, and also we're putting a burden on potentially new and everything. So is that something that the team is going to be looking at to say, well, look, if the state government's not even doing it, then I guess why are we doing it, right? I know it's still beneficial. I hope we still do a bit of it. But at the same time, if these guys have been pretty much saying, no, we're not going to do it, and yet we're pushing up against the hill and stream, or what do you want to call it, surely we should actually review what this really means for us and adapt to it. Is that something that I guess you know the team is looking at and reviewing, rather than kind of just we just still can continue on going by ourselves?
So just 2 points of clarity.
Yep.
The scope isn't excluding affordable housing being considered. It's excluding a mandatory rate. The main reason for that is that the whole Planning and Environment Act is currently being reviewed, and there's some additional thinking around how to apply mandatory controls, what to do in a bigger context. We're still thinking through how we approach the new process with consideration of the mandatory control, because that's what was endorsed in December. What I can do is, you know, provide an update when we've landed on this. We're still understanding what the new controls look like. I think the important thing is this is a process where we're party to it, and I still think, you know, the position of council of advocating for affordable housing is still very real and a real issue for the city to grapple and handle and have a position on. But it's just understanding there's a difference between a mandatory control, which is where we landed, and a standard kind of approach to affordable housing. So that's still very much being considered.
All right. Thanks, Joe, for that very comprehensive presentation. I will now move back to a motion, and I invite a councillor to move a motion, I believe.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I seek to move an alternate motion if council business has that to hand. Thank you. Could I just ask you to scroll down to the bottom? Thank you. If you just pause there. Yes, I confirm that's the alternate motion that I seek to move.
Right, thank you. And you're the mover of that alternate motion. And is there a seconder? Councillor Philip Leilou, are you happy to second? Yep, you're seconding. Great. Back to you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Can I begin by thanking management for their work on this item, which has been long and extensive and is very much appreciated. I am seeking to move an alternate motion tonight, and in doing that, I'd like to thank our submitter, Dr. Kate Kennedy from Kensington, for raising a number of issues which the paragraphs in blue seek to address, to make sure that there is that transparency for our community, that we are advocating for the opportunity for those interested parties to be heard, and that information is very much available to the community. So that is the reason for the inclusion of these additional paragraphs in the alternate motion. I thank Dr. Kate Kennedy for her advocacy. Can I just provide a little bit of background? So as those who have followed this closely will recall, Amendment C417 was designed to implement the Macaulay Structure Plan 2021 and the Development Contributions Plan, and it sits within that broader context of Macaulay now being included in the Inner Melbourne train and tram zone, and the support of more housing near public transport. In December last year, this council requested that C417 go to an independent panel. And that management also investigate a public acquisition overlay for potential open space, which we know is so desperately needed in this part of the City of Melbourne. Towards the end of last year, on the 22nd of December, we were advised that instead of that independent panel process, the Minister had established the Macaulay Advisory Committee, and you've heard from Joe tonight how that process is somewhat different. The department has been directed to prepare new planning controls that would replace C417, and there will be hearings, beginning with the directions hearing and final hearings from February to May in this year. Now, we have been asked for council to pause its further work on the amendment while this state-led advisory work is underway. In the interim, as you've heard, the Lord Mayor has written to the Minister, in particular stressing that this new process be aligned with Council's objectives. Now, we acknowledge there may be some benefits from this advisory process, in particular a faster resolution, which would be very much welcomed, I suspect, after the many, many years that the community has been engaged in this process, and the opportunity to progress that desperately needed public open space. But there is, of course, some risk, which you've heard about tonight, that the outcomes sought by council do not translate directly into the state's draft provisions. So that's why our council officers have been working very closely with the state, and I thank them for their advocacy to make sure that the state controls match council's preferred provisions. And I understand there has been good progress in aligning those two sets of controls in most areas. Noting that the advisory committee has been appointed, it is management's view, and I agree, that it would not be practical and efficient to continue with the work of this council on C417. It is, in fact, a much better use of resources to pause that work, because to do otherwise would simply be to duplicate work and create an unnecessary demand on resources. I am very grateful for Dr. Kate Kennedy's advocacy about the impacts on the community as a result of this, and these three paragraphs seek to address that. We acknowledge that the changes initiated by the Minister midway through what has been a very, very long planning scheme amendment process may cause some concern within the community, and we want to ensure that there is full transparency. We want to support the ability of new interested parties to request to be heard by the advisory committee, and we want to make sure that any new proposed controls are publicly available. So that is why you see the alternate motion before you tonight. In particular, I do know that our management will continue to strongly advocate for the Macaulay Structure Plan 2021 and the version of C417 that was endorsed by Council in December to be the basis of Council's position through this advisory process. And in closing, I would like to thank the people who have worked on this now for many, many years. To Joe Cannington and Evan Council and your team, in particular Tim Westcott, I know that this has been such important work that the community has taken a real interest in, but also that this council, this group of councillors has. So as we move to this next chapter in this work, we look forward to hearing how that new advisory committee process evolves.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Councillor Philae-Lou, nothing is seconded. All right, would any of the councillors like to speak to this item? No, in that case, we'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. All right, we move on to agenda item 6.4, Parks and Gardens Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? I'm seeing a nod there, so I will invite, it's going to be David Callow or Evan. David Callow, the great David Callow, to our Director of Parks and City Greening to make a brief presentation to us.
Great. Thank you, Lord Mayor, and good evening, councillors and members of the public. I will be providing a verbal presentation this evening that highlights key points from the report, starting from point 8, which is under the purpose. The purpose of the report tonight is to seek endorsement of the updated terms of reference for the Parks and Gardens Advisory Committee. Moving to the background now, the Parks and Gardens Advisory Committee was first established in 2009 and replaced a number of individual park committees, and so has operated for 17 years since then. The committee terms of reference have been updated approximately every 4 years, with the previous terms of reference from 2021. A review of the current terms of reference, which are attached to the report, commenced in August 2025. The attached updated terms of reference uses the new template for the City of Melbourne that was developed in June 2025. Once implemented across advisory committees, the updated terms of reference will provide consistency and governance across Council's advisory committees. Moving now to the key considerations outlined in the report. Officers have considered the operational needs of the committee in making the updates to the terms of reference. Management's recommendations will provide officers with the guidance to manage the committee well and with clear governance, and to continue the committee to function as a meaningful and engaged advisory committee. Key changes in the terms of reference that are outlined in point 17 of the report include the addition of our First Nations and Garden City Ambassador roles, and also a corresponding reduction in the number of technical members from 8 to 6 in the committee. The key changes also include expanded eligibility criteria for both community and technical members. It includes a reference to action from the Stretch Reconciliation Plan requiring at least one Aboriginal member on committees. We've also included the introduction of a term limit for technical representatives on the committee. Previously, technical representatives did not have a term. That has been outlined in the new terms of reference as 4 years, which aligns with community representatives. The new terms of reference also provide guidance on managing where there's changes during a term and replacement of committee members. We've also changed the terms of reference to move from a process of every 2 years, recruiting new members, to being a 4-year changeover of committee members. Also added to the terms of reference are guidance around function of meetings, including conduct and protocols, the appointment of proxies, and detailed guidance on agendas and minutes. And finally, there's enhanced governance in the terms of reference, including improved guidance on conflicts of interest, disclosable interest and information management. Moving to point 24 in the report that talks about consultation. The existing committee was consulted in regards to the changes to the terms of reference through a survey and also a minutes of discussion in August 2025 about the proposed changes. That concludes the verbal presentation, and back to you, Chair, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, David. Do any councillors have questions for David? Councillor Guest, do you want to? I think you got your hand up first.
No hurry. Thank you, Lord Mayor. David, just from listening to your report of this, it strikes me that you're making changes that ensure the possibility of someone Indigenous at the expense of people with technical expertise on this advisory committee. It just seems a strange development when you're looking naturally to improve our parks and gardens here in Melbourne and Victoria. I wonder if you could explain that. And I also add, at the end of last year, the 2 ambassadors, they went through this council in a closed session. Can you sort of give me insight, if we go through that process again, that that would be done in an open session and openly transparent to the public? I just find the changes that you've represented here don't automatically tell me that this is a step forward and an improvement.
Okay, thank you for the question, Councillor Guest. To address your first comment around Aboriginal representation, the existing terms of reference require an Aboriginal person to be represented on the committee, so there's no change there in terms of the previous and new terms of reference. In terms of your question around the ambassadors, if I understand you correctly, the Garden City Ambassador, the First Nations Garden City Ambassador, were recruited for their expertise and ability to provide advice and guidance to the City of Melbourne on matters relating to greening of the city and parks and gardens, and so there's a natural fit with their representation on the Parks and Gardens Advisory Committee.
All right, thank you, David. I understand you've got a series of questions, Councillor Ball, so we'll go to Councillor Liu and then we'll come to you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was looking at this terms of reference, and under point number 2, composition, the second dot point, you've got a maximum of 15 external representatives appointed by the CEO. This includes 8 community representatives, up to 6 technical representatives, the First Nations Garden City Ambassador, and the Garden City Ambassador. So when I add them all up, it's 16. So, but you have only a maximum of 15. So is it a typo, or is it somewhere you have to take one person out?
Councillor, thank you for the question. Which section of the terms of reference were you referring to?
2, composition.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just getting across that. We currently have 16 members of the committee. We're saying, under the dot point here, a maximum of 15 external representatives. This includes 8 community representatives, up to 6 technical representatives. You're correct. I think there is a typo there in terms of that would add up to 16 representatives. Yep.
Thank you. So my second question is, still under that dot point, you have, this includes a minimum of 1 First Nations representative. Now, since we have the First Nations Garden City Ambassador, it has to be First Nations. So does it mean that having that person there, the First Nations Garden City Ambassador, all other 15 positions can be non-First Nations? It's possible. Is that correct?
If I understand you correctly, that is correct, in that having the First Nations Garden City Ambassador as a member of the Parks and Gardens Advisory Committee meets our commitment under the Stretch Reconciliation Action Plan, which is to have a First Nations representative on all advisory committees.
So that means all the other 15, we don't have to, but we can.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And now, another question I have is under 2.4.1. You have an invitation to organizations and then blah, 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 to nominate a suitable person. And then you have down, here, 4.6. If the external member is an organizational member, then the organization will be asked to send an alternative representative. So I'm a bit confused. Are we appointing organizational member as our committee members, or are we asking organizations to nominate people to be on the committee as an individual member?
Okay, thank you for the question, Councillor, and through you, Chair. What we're asking is for organisations to nominate an employee of that organisation to be a technical representative on our committee. That's the current practice as the committee currently operates, and we would be continuing that practice.
So we are nominating organizations, and it's up to the organization to send their representatives. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I also have another question here. Let me just find it. It is about the criteria. You asked the panel to select based on, that's right. So this is 2.4.1. 1, 2, 3, the fourth dot point. The selection panel must have regard to the following when making their recommendation. And the sub-dot point, number 2, the diversity of the community with reference to lived experience, age, sex, gender, identity, sexuality, culture, and linguistic background, and social economic status. That's very, very good. I can see that we are very inclusive. Now, if someone cannot perform the 4-year term and leaves, a replacement would have to be according to, like what it says here, have regard to the following when making their recommendation. So does it mean that if a young person decided to leave, we have to have another young person rather than looking at the next best suitable person? Is that the logic behind it?
Thank you for the question, Councillor, and through you, Chair. I think we're speaking in hypotheticals here, and I think what's outlined in the terms of reference, which is current practice, is that we would seek to use the recruitment process. If someone had to leave the committee mid-term, and it's outlined in the terms of reference here, we would use the selection process, the recruitment process, to find the next most suitable person for the committee. That doesn't mean we're seeking necessarily to replicate the person who has left the committee, but we'd be looking for another suitable person.
My last question is still under 2.4.1, but further down, maybe the last fourth dot point, and that is it talked about the remainder of the previous incumbent's terms. So say if someone did 3 years and then the last year we have a replacement. So that person, would it be seen as has done 1 term? The question is because if, say, that person is considered to have done 1 term and consider to re-nominate for another term, then all up is only 5 years. So would that person be eligible to go for another 3 years, or no, this is it because it's 2 terms?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. David, I think that's a governance question. Can I refer that to you?
Just bringing David Thompson, our head of governance, who I was just mentioning. Maybe he might share some light on this.
Through you, Lord Mayor. Councillor, can you please repeat the question?
Okay, so what it says here, casual vacancies which occur due to external members being unable to complete the full term of their appointments may be filled by co-opting suitable candidates from a previous selection process for the remainder of the previous incumbent's terms. So, if someone has done 3 years, the next person who came in and do 1 year, so is that seen as 1 term, or not?
It is seen as 1 year of the term that's been committed. The terms of reference talk about the length of time and the number of years that they've been on the committee. The template is a guidance or an outline designed for good governance practices to give maximum flexibility, having regard to the findings from an internal audit that took place in 2022.
So that means that person can do 1 year of that term, do another 4 years for another term, and can continue to do another term of 3 years.
I see the point that you're making there. It's not like the US presidential system where you can only do a maximum of 2 terms, for example, 8 years. In the example that you're putting forward, for example, you'd be suggesting that individual would be on there for 9 years?
No,
Scenario
8.
like one year plus an existing 4-year type terminology. So therefore they would be on the committee for 5 years in the example that you're given. Sorry, hang on one.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just to assist Councillor Liu, if you look at the dot point on page 11, it says external members will be appointed for a term of 4 years. So if they're only appointed for 1 year of a 4-year particular term, that's 1 year of 4 years. So they've still got 3 years to go.
Lord Mayor, if I...
Okay.
Yes, Councillor Rouse.
Just for the record, it's 10 years minus 1 day for the US presidency. Down to brass knuckles. Anyway, the interpretation of that says that the application would not be considered. So therefore, if you've done 1 year of 1 term and then you apply for a second year, you've now done 5 years total, but you haven't done 2 terms. Therefore, application for a new term should or would be eligible because you haven't done 2 terms.
I don't understand, but I understood what Eleanor said.
All right. We do need to keep moving on. Does that conclude your questions, Councillor Liu? Over to you, Councillor Dr. Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, David. I have 2 questions. The first I'll put to alert council business because I haven't submitted this in writing, but I wonder if you'd be kind enough to find the standard form of wording which says permits editorial changes as necessary by management to this addition, and that would be an amendment I would like to seek support for from my colleagues to address some of these issues, like Councillor Liu has noted the number of members of the committee, or anything else that needs to be smoothed out that would give you authority to do that on our behalf after the matter is considered tonight. If council business could please find that wording. My other question concerns the Code of Conduct, which is mentioned in section 4. It says that all committee members will abide by the Advisory Committee Code of Conduct. I'm not familiar with this document and it is not appended, but assuming it does exist, can I also ask council business to add some standard wording to the motion at the end, where it says, at the end of the first para, where it says, direct that it be annexed to the minutes. Could the Advisory Committee Code of Conduct also be annexed to the minutes? Do you need me to repeat any of that? Fantastic, and then I'll seek support of my colleagues for that. Thank you.
So we'll get some governance advice, David, on what's being suggested by Councillor Ball is possible, and then if she wishes, as any councillor can, you can move them in. We'll see if there's a seconder.
That is correct, Lord Mayor.
Right, thank you. Back to you, Councillor Ball. No, we're not to that yet.
I just put it as a question so that council business could work on it for me. Thank you.
Good. Oh, all right. Are there any further questions for David Callow? Councillor Leilou, do you have a question? Oh, okay. I thought you were putting your hand up. Thanks, David, for that. All right, we move on. I'm going to see if there is a councillor who wishes to move the motion which has been prepared by officers.
I'm happy to move that motion.
All right. Is there a seconder for that motion? I can see heads nodding. Councillor Phil Leilou. Okay, you're seconding. Back to you as mover, Councillor Griffiths.
Recognising, first of all, that there's been some amendments mooted there that I can't incorporate as the mover, but I might speak to them as well. I think there's some good suggestions there, and particularly that capacity to make some of those editorial changes, which for people who are watching tonight will be able to see and hopefully appreciate the depth of scrutiny that all of the documentations that come to this chamber go through. And to Councillor Liu, very well picked up on the 15 and 16, for instance, and I hope that that genuinely gives reassurance to people about the level of thought that we put into all of our deliberations here, and that this is another example of that. This is a wonderful committee. I'm a very lucky councillor. I get to not only sit on the Parks and Gardens Advisory Committee, but also the Disability Advisory Committee and the Homelessness Advisory Committee, and I can see how all of those different committees function, and the very good work that the people who, in large part, give up their time to come and advise the council on some really important matters across those consider, and the capacity to standardise some of the work that is done and our approach to those committees is something that I think is important, and as has been noted through the discussions tonight, arises out of some internal audit processes that have been done in the past. And so I'm grateful to Councillor Leilou for seconding the motion, because that is one of the things that we look at on our Audit and Risk Advisory Committee, where we receive a number of internal audits and go to some lengths to make sure that we are acquitting those pieces of advice that come through that. And this motion, as we have heard, goes to making some of those changes that have been suggested. Particularly, Lord Mayor, I do want to take the opportunity to thank the Parks and Gardens Advisory Committee and the members thereof. We're having our first meeting tomorrow night, and that is why we've got that particular amendment in there. It's not an amendment, that particular clause in there at 7.2 about having these changes come into effect very quickly. I'm really looking forward to that committee meeting, and that committee does some excellent work, and of course it's going to be joined by two special members at the meeting tomorrow night. Formally for the first time, the Garden City Ambassador, the First Nations Garden City Ambassador, which of course is going to set out some of the work that we'll be doing over this term to really highlight the importance of greening Melbourne. Something that you, Lord Mayor, have led, and I think that this committee, with those roles and now with this additional framework around it, is really going to be able to move forward, and I look forward to seeing similar motions come up over time as management have the capacity to review some of the other advisory committees to make sure that we're meeting all of the kinds of obligations that our internal audit process has identified, and very happy to be moving the motion tonight.
Councillor Griffiths, over to you, Councillor Philip Leilou.
Thank you. Happy to second it and support Councillor Griffiths. I know the lot of work that you have done, Councillor Griffiths. I do think the inclusion of First Nations people in the Parks and Gardens is appropriate, mainly because it fascinated me the amount of knowledge they know about fire, about the trees, and walking through some of the bushes with them, and just knowing, which ones actually you can eat, which ones you don't. That knowledge is actually quite, I would say, mind-blowing in some. I hope that they would take that into the knowledge here, make Melbourne. I wouldn't suggest eating some of the sunflower seeds outside and all the other stuff, but dear I said, I've seen some people already started eating the chili and everything, so who knows, we could get something out of this, but happy to second this.
All right, thank you, Councillor Leilu. Are there any other speakers to this motion?
I would like to move the amendments, please.
All right.
If this is the best time to do that.
Yes, you can move an amendment at this during debate.
I just mentioned it.
Right. Good. Does that meet with your satisfaction, Councillor Ball?
Thank you very much to Council Business. Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
All right. So moved by Councillor Ball. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rouse. Back to you as the mover of the amendment, Councillor Ball.
Thank you. I hope it's self-explanatory. I'm not sure what the Code of Conduct is, and our members, since this is taking effect as per clause number 2, it takes effect tomorrow, and we have a meeting of the Parks and Gardens Advisory Committee tomorrow. They need to know what the Code of Conduct is that applies immediately, as do we all, those of us on the committee. So that really does need clarification. I appreciate that very much.
All right, thank you. Councillor Rouse, do you wish to add anything to that? All right. Do any other councillors want to speak to the amended motion that is up on the screen before us? Yes, I'm just seeking a debate on the amendment first, and don't think there are. Okay, so we're now going to vote on whether the amendment is accepted. So let's vote on that. I put that to councillors. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Okay, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Ball, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Louis, Councillor Liu and Councillor Griffiths. All those against? Councillor Guest. That amendment is passed. And so the amendment has been accepted. I believe we can now, David, I can now seek further debate on the amendment, on the
motion, because that's now the motion.
So we now have a substantive motion before us with the amendments in it. Would anybody like to speak to that? No, in that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, we've accepted the amendment in the motion before us. Councillor Rouse, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Louis, Councillor Liu, Councillor Griffiths. All those against the motion that is before us, Councillor Guest and Councillor Ball. There you go. That motion is passed. All right, we move on to our next agenda item, which is, well, actually, before we do that, I will note that we have concluded the reports from management and we move on to general business. There are 2 items of general business. The first of those is a notice of motion from the Lord Mayor, responsible utilisation of AI infrastructure, including data centres. And I will call on Chris Thrum, who requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Thank you, Chris Thrum.
Thank you, Lord Mayor Nicholas Rees, councillors, management team. We're looking at agenda item 7.1, notice of motion. Lord Mayor Nicholas Rees, responsible utilisation of AI infrastructures, including data centres. I'd like to thank Councillor David Griffiths for being the seconder on this motion. This is a very important motion that's being put forward, and it's a very topical situation that's occurring all around the world about the ubiquity of data centres around the world. I've let the listeners know and the viewers know that I've sent to the City of Melbourne management team and the councillors a link to a report that was commissioned by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. He's a ranking member of the US Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labour and Pensions, the HELP Committee. And he commissioned him to do a report in regards to artificial intelligence and its impact on society. And it's sobering, compelling reading, and I'd encourage all the listeners and viewers to look for that report that Bernie Sanders commissioned from the committee, the HELP Committee in the US Senate. And one of the conclusions that his team found was that they're looking at the fact that AI could eliminate 100 million American jobs in the next decade. That's right, 100 million jobs are going to be lost in the next decade they consider in America. We're going to be looking at the same kind of impact in Australia as well. We should have an abundance of caution in regards to data centres. They're not going to help climate change. They're going to suck up all the water out of our dams. They're going to drain the electricity out of our grid. Interesting enough, at the Davos conference just recently, Elon Musk was interviewed by Larry Fink, and Elon Musk stated that in the future, which they're aiming for, there's going to be more human robots on planet Earth than actual human beings. So that's a concern. We also look at the French. The French have sort of initiated. On Thursday, the 20th of January, the Prime Minister of France, Sébastien Lecornu, announced that the French government would completely remove Microsoft Teams and Zoom, their software technology for video conferencing, from French government platforms. Why? So the French are now quarantining certain sections of their government from Silicon Valley, California. So I would urge City of Melbourne to consider the report from Bernie Sanders' committee and consider the actions of the French government. After much detailed discussion, they're working out how to pivot and manoeuvre away from Silicon Valley. And I do thank the Lord Mayor for bringing this forward. This is a very important debate that should be occurring now. People don't realise what it's like. It's going to be coming down the track.
All right, thank you for that, Chris Thrum. Quite a bit of research gone into that submission. Appreciated. All right, we will now. I'm now going to request that the notice of motion, which I drafted last week and submitted, be put on the screen, and I'm going to move that motion. I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you. Now, I should say, since drafting that motion, there has been some feedback from councillors and some quite helpful amendments have been suggested under our procedural rules here at the City of Melbourne. I'm not in a position to move those amendments because I'm the mover of the notice of motion, and under the interpretation of the rules, I can't now move those amendments because I'm the mover. So I'm going to see if there's another councillor, Deputy Lord Mayor, who wishes to move some helpful amendments.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. If this is an appropriate time, I will seek to do that. If I could just ask them to be brought up. Could I trouble council business just to scroll down? Thank you. If you can continue to scroll. Thank you. If you continue to scroll. Thank you. Yes, they're the amendments I seek to move.
Excellent. Is there a seconder for that amended motion? Councillor Andrew Rouse, thank you very much. Back to you as the mover of the amended motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was in particular going to begin by thanking you and Councillor Griffiths for your extensive work on the substantive motion, which I certainly do support. The reason that I am seeking these amendments tonight is twofold. First of all, the need for this work to be done, and that has become evident by the fact that just this summer there has in fact been a planning application for a data centre in the City of Melbourne at 127 Todd Road. That application was determined by the Minister under the Development Facilitation Pathway. It was due to come to this meeting of FMC, but the Minister made a decision prior to this FMC meeting taking place. And perhaps the most important point I want to make is at the moment that decision was made in the absence of any comprehensive sustainability or planning policy guidance for data centres. So the reality is very clear. This sort of planning application is being brought forward in the City of Melbourne. The policy does not exist to make sure there are good sustainability and planning outcomes in the context of data centres, and that is why this work is urgently needed. So I'm grateful to you, Lord Mayor, for bringing this before the committee tonight, because it is the case that these approvals are already being granted and our planning system has not yet caught up with the impact of AI-driven infrastructure. That is one of the reasons that I was very passionate about bringing these amendments. But the other is that the reality is there is work that needs to be done about whether the City of Melbourne is the most appropriate place for data centres. And that is what 1.5.3.2 seeks to do. It seeks an analysis of potential locations in the City of Melbourne that might be considered for data centres and whether they in fact have the energy requirements that are necessary to run those, the water that is necessary to run those, but also is that the best use of land in a central city where land is incredibly valuable? And we know in decades to come there likely will be a real demand on those sites. It's also worth taking the time to analyse whether or not data centres in particular are going to make a contribution to this city's economy, to its jobs, and not just be boxes that are not making a real contribution to growing the economy of Melbourne. So they are two aspects that I seek to have some policy work done on by virtue of these amendments, and that is why I commend them to my councillor colleagues.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Councillor Andrew Rouse, did you want to speak to the proposed amendments?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm seconding these amendments to strengthen the original motion, not to change its intent, but certainly to make our position as a council much clearer and much stronger. The key difference is that this amended motion affirms that Melbourne supports the growth of data centres and digital infrastructure as critical enablers of our innovation economy, research capability, sovereign data needs, as Chris did bring up earlier, renewable energy adoption, and jobs, of course. And that clarity, I think, is very important. These amendments remove any ambiguity about where Melbourne stands. We are pro-innovation, pro-technology and pro-future economy. And as the Deputy Lord Mayor established, there are many different types of data centres, whether it be the hyperscale data centres that we might see that Amazon or Google might be rolling out, or whether they be co-location or edge data centres, things that will certainly drive a lot of advancement in our small hubs here in Melbourne. At the same time, these amendments also sharpen the focus on how we lead not whether we participate. They strengthen references to sustainability, energy efficiency, water stewardship, and community outcomes, and they do that in a way that encourages best practice design and innovation rather than blunt restriction. The amendments also recognise the reality of planning decisions being made at a state level and position council appropriately as a leader in policy guidance, advocacy and collaboration, rather than overstating our regulatory role. In short, these amendments turn a good motion into a clear statement of leadership. Melbourne welcomes innovation, and we intend to set the standard for how it is done responsibly. If Melbourne wants to remain a globally competitive city, we must lead in digital infrastructure, not fear it and not follow it. I commend the amendments to my council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rouse. Does anybody else wish to speak to the amendments that have been put forward? No, in that case, we'll put the amendments to the vote. All those in favour of the amendments, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. So the amendments now become the substantive motion, and we move back to debating the amended substantive motion. As the original mover of the original motion, I will now speak to that, including the amendments. And can I begin by thanking the Deputy Lord Mayor and Councillor Andrew Rouse for some very well-considered and sensible amendments that I wholeheartedly support. I also want to thank Councillor Griffiths for his interest in this policy area and for working with me in recent times on this. In Melbourne, we are a pro-innovation, pro-business council, and we welcome the investment and benefits that come from AI and data centres. But we also recognise that this needs to be done in a responsible, well-planned way that is in the public interest. We do know that AI and data centre growth is accelerating rapidly, and this is driven by national and global investment. And this growth does represent an important economic opportunity, but there are also significant environmental infrastructure and other pressures that come with some of that investment. You know, when hyper innovative, super successful economies like Singapore have introduced moratoriums on new data centres, as has occurred, that clearly indicates that this is a area that needs to be carefully monitored, and that we have to have a proper, appropriate policy framework in place. Indeed, the introduction of data centres is forecast to account for close to 20% of all the energy in the grid in Melbourne by 2050, and planned data centres in the western suburbs alone could need 20 billion litres of water annually, accounting for close to 5% of Greater Melbourne's drinking water supply. Indeed, the rise of data centres will be the biggest thing to hit our energy system since the introduction of air conditioning in the 1960s. And we do need to ensure that we have the proper energy planning, water planning and planning, statutory planning frameworks and environmental planning frameworks in place so that we can rise to meet the challenge and the opportunity that comes with these new data centres. I will note at the C40 World Mayors Summit, the COP30 Local Leaders Summit in Brazil, there was enormous interest in this area from cities across the world. So this is not an opportunity and a challenge that Melbourne is facing alone. The debate that we're having in this chamber tonight is a debate that is going on in city halls and parliaments across the world at the moment, and it's something that we need to get right. We want to be a smart city, but we don't want to cook the planet while we're doing that. And so I do think there is certainly ways that we can achieve that. But again, we need to have the right policy frameworks in place. And I do believe it is possible to have a win-win here, that the investment in new data centres is going to drive significant new energy demand. But if that new energy investment is occurring in renewable power, and if it's also driving new investment in recycled water facilities and better, more sustainable water practices, then we can have a world in which we take advantages of all the benefits that come with the AI revolution, but we also have an energy system that ultimately becomes more sustainable, and we help drive that transition through the investment that is happening across this sector. But we're going to need to do work to ensure that that occurs, and so that's why I have drafted this motion, and I do hope it meets with the support of councillors this evening. Councillor Griffiths, as seconder.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to the councillors who have moved amendments and spoken to those as well. I think the motion that we have now before us is a better one for all of the work that each person has put into it. And Lord Mayor, I want to start by thanking you for, first of all, bringing this motion, but obviously in the leadership that you showed by, first of all, going to the C40 World Mayors Summit in Rio last year, with the support of this council, obviously, and the work that was done there, the leadership that you showed alongside the City of Phoenix, and the fact that you brought back the learnings and knowledge that you had from the conversations that you had there to help inform this motion, which is clearly at the very cutting edge of the kinds of issues which cities are considering around the world, and noteworthy at a time when some national governments are moving away from acting in the environmental spaces that we are seeking to do so here, and to come up with that win-win that you described. And I think that's what I would hope that all of us around this table are aiming for, and that the only way that you do end up with that win-win of good environmental outcomes and good research, good business and good economics being built on the back of things like data centres is actually to put in a good amount of thought before these things start to roll out, rather than turning around 10 years after the fact and hoping to find a win-win when the horse has bolted. So I think it's fantastic that we have this motion before us. We've obviously already given, as councillors, a fair amount of thought to what we'd like to see being considered in there, and now over to officers. And so thanks in advance to them for the work that is going to be undertaken as a result of this motion. And I really look forward to having that come back through portfolio, come back to this chamber and allow us to end up with the kind of win-wins which you've described in the motion. I am obviously very happy to be seconding it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Griffiths. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion before us? Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As we've heard, data centres and AI infrastructure are not abstract concepts. They underpin medical research, climate modelling, advanced manufacturing, startups, government services, and the everyday digital tools our communities rely on. They are now core economic infrastructure, just like transport, energy and water once were. They are coming whether we like it or not, and I'm excited that this motion can at least demonstrate some leadership in that space. Unfortunately, as we've heard, there is lots of fear-mongering related to this topic. There is also lots of nuance related to this topic, and unfortunately I think we are worse off as a society for failing to recognise both of those things. This motion, however, rightly recognises the reality, and importantly, it rejects the false choice between innovation and environmental responsibility. Melbourne can and should do both. By focusing on best practice sustainability benchmarks, renewable energy integration, recycled water use, emerging cooling technologies that don't use water, and reheat use, we position environmental performance as a competitive advantage for Melbourne, not a compliance burden. I'm particularly excited at the forward-looking nature of this motion, specifically reporting back on how Melbourne can strengthen its position as a global leader in sustainable digital infrastructure and ensures we're not just managing the impacts of it, we're actively building the next chapter of our economy. I spoke to some organisations doing some research in this topic recently, and you said before, we can have a world where we have infrastructure that's not draining the grid and using water. I strongly agree with you. I know that because we already have local Melbourne startups that are doing that. using data centres that do not use water in their cooling, that are able to use solar energy during the middle of the day when we have peak load issues already and we're having to sell energy for a negative price. This is a massive opportunity for us to transition to renewables, and it's one that I hope that Melbourne jumps on board with. This is how a confident city governs, welcoming innovation, demanding excellence, and planning for the long term, and I am pleased to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion before us? I might briefly use my right of reply and just thank Councillor Rouse for calling out the false choice between investment in new technology and the environment. You're absolutely right. We can have both. What's more, we can get a win-win here with the investment in new AI data centres potentially being a catalyst for new investment in renewables, which delivers benefits for the operators of those data centres, but actually also the broader community. And same goes for water. I also want to call out the point made by the Deputy Lord Mayor around the highest and best use of land, which is a fundamental economic principle around land use. And you know, here in the city of Melbourne, we have very valuable tracts of land, which is very close to the most densely populated part of the state, indeed the most densely populated part of Australia. And so we do need to ask questions about whether the highest and best use of those tracts of land are data centres, which are often very large warehouses full of electrical equipment, very few people employed there, or whether those sites are best used for other purposes, such as university campuses, residential addresses, places of high employment with labour forces. That, of course, needs to be weighed up around other considerations around the performance of data centres close to population centres. So there are some technical questions that need to be looked at there as part of us getting the policy settings right and contributing to the broader policy debate that's going on at federal, state and now city level as well. On that note, put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise their hands. I declare that carried unanimously. We move on to agenda item 7.2. It's a notice of motion as well. And it is I'm just looking to my papers, everyone. It is a notice of motion from the Lord Mayor, safeguarding Melbourne's civic statues, monuments, fountains and memorials. I would request that notice of motion, as it was lodged last week, please be put on the screen. Oh, I apologise. We have a request from Jake Land to address the committee in relation to this matter. Apologies, Jake. You've been waiting there very patiently, and we welcome your contribution.
Thank you. I've read the motion that the Lord Mayor proposed, and I propose to add the following to the notice of motion: that a small plaque or sign be placed at each valuable statue, monument, fountain, memorial, council buildings or property, reading as follows or similar: reward of $25,000 will be paid by the City of Melbourne to anyone providing information leading to the conviction of anyone destroying or damaging the structure requiring major repairs. I feel that most major damage to these structures is done by people with a political agenda rather than vandals, and offering a reward would be a major deterrent. The amount of the reward is a suggestion only. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that, Jake, and thank you for your interest in this matter. All right, I will now request that the motion that I drafted be put on the screen. That is the one, and I'm looking for a seconder for that motion. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. And look, I will now speak to this motion before us. You can ask a question at any stage of proceedings.
Yes, Lauren, I think. Hi, Lauren. So in light of the motion and everything, can I just ask, so a promise was made to, I guess, councillors. So this was obviously been quite a long time, and I also want to acknowledge you're quite new. So this is not anything that is in your responsibility. Sorry, it is your responsibility, but it was also within a timeline that is not within your timeline of when it's starting. But I'm keen to get an idea and background because it's been close to a year. And if not longer around this. And so to the best of your abilities, if you can answer these questions. So a promise was made to councillors, I guess, to fix the statutes in February 2025. Now a year has passed and just keen to understand what has been the hold up.
Through you, Lord Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Lelu. Officers did commit to rectify the King George statue in February 2025. However, in March-April 2025, the statue's severed head made several prominent appearances, leading to a sustained police investigation. We paused repairs in the hope that the head may be retrieved. However, we are no longer anticipating the head's retrieval and have thus commenced engagement with Heritage Victoria around the requirements for creating a new head and will proceed as quickly as possible based on their requirements, which include constructing a replacement in line with the historical aesthetic of the monument, as well as creating interpretive signage. We are also required to undertake a heritage impact assessment, which we have engaged a material conservationalist to progress, and we are working closely and proactively with Heritage Victoria.
So just following up on that, so we do require a permit from Heritage Victoria, to which we have applied and which we still have not received a permit from Heritage Victoria.
That is correct. In the process of applying for that permit, certain investigative work needs to be undertaken to establish what the permit needs to be for. So we are now working with Heritage Victoria to do the work required to understand what will be required as part of that permit.
Okay, cool, that's fine. So there was also talks about, there was a review of the, I've got to get it right, Monuments and Memorial Policy Review. And just wondering, was that also taken when we decided on February 2025, or was that something that management has decided to take upon themselves?
So the need for the review was recommended by officers to councillors at a briefing in July 2024, and the recommendation was supported. The draft findings of that review will be presented to the Creative Arts Portfolio as a first step in April this year before coming to the broader councillor group.
Right, so it was a briefing but not a decision of
Correct,
council.
it was a briefing, a recommendation and a discussion at a briefing.
Can I ask a question for clarification? Are we discussing the plaques and memorials policy?
No, this is a separate review.
New policy that doesn't yet exist? We don't have a policy of that name?
Correct, this is monuments and memorials and it is a review at this stage, not a policy.
Is that the one that's
there
coming
is
back in April?
So through you, there is a plaques and memorials policy. This is separate to that. This is a review of our monuments and memorials, and that is what is coming to councillors from April this year.
Okay. All right,
That actually clarifies up one of my other questions, because there's a few. So this is new. So we don't, it's not existing, sorry, this is not a review of the existing one that we have, which is usually have the plaques and street names and other stuff. This is a completely new review, or sorry, a policy to address it. Sorry, it's not a policy, it's a review of the things that
Correct,
yet to come.
It is a review to help guide further conversations on this topic, and will include a comprehensive investigation of what organisations all across the world have been doing to manage these issues.
Cool, thank you. So I've just got a couple more. In terms of the total cost of repair, so currently what is the budget what we have for fixing statues and monuments, and also which portfolio that sits under?
Sure. So the total budget for maintaining the entire art and heritage collection, which is not just monuments but our internal artworks as well, is $200,000, and that sits within the Creative Arts Portfolio.
Okay. And so based on, I guess, the damages and everything, can I safely say that if we were to repair and given that the new damages and everything, there is probably not enough budget to fix everything that is been vandalised and damaged?
That will depend on insurance claims made and whether they are successful. Should we leave insurance out, then no, the costs to repair the monuments would more than double the annual budget.
Awesome, thank you. In terms of the repair method, so it was recommended to council that I think, if it was specific to the King George statue in the head, that, replacement of the head and everything. I was wondering if the team has looked at innovative solutions and repairs, given that there are other ways around it and also more financial, sustainable materials that we can do it rather than just copper and everything, because I know it's a heritage and everything. And what has the team done to look at, rather than just looking at replacing life for life, but also being innovative to think about?
So you did allude to the fact it is a Heritage Victoria issue. So 50 of our 130 outdoor statues do have heritage overlays. So noting the age of the monuments, how we carry out repairs is dependent on the advice we receive from the conservationists and heritage specialists we're required to engage, and also dependent on the conditions laid out in the Heritage Victoria permits. These permits tend to require the engagement of various specialists to undertake various assessments. There are 3D scans and moulds that can assist in rectifying monuments, particularly where body parts are taken. It makes it much easier to replace those body parts. That is something we can consider, and that is something that would be useful if we're intending to repair some of these monuments ongoing.
Awesome. And my final question, so has there been any attempt to contact, I guess, the people who have damaged the vandals? I know some of them have gone to a documentary and everything. Has there been any attempt by us to kind of say, bring it back because that would save a lot of money and everything, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, officers have not made any attempts, as that has been an ongoing police investigation, and we would see the remit of those contacts to rest with the police.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Leilou. Thank you, Lauren, for those answers. All right. As mover, I'm going to speak to this motion now and explain why it is before us this evening. Melbourne's statues, monuments, fountains and memorials are part of our city's civic story. They sit proudly in our parks, gardens and streets as visible reminders of who we are, where we have come from and how our identity has evolved. These works were not placed randomly. They were established through formal democratic decisions made here in this chamber by democratically elected councillors over many decades. This motion is very clear. Decisions made through democracy, through council, must be changed through democracy, through this council, and not through vandalism, not by protesters, not by the mob. Over the past few years, we have seen repeated acts of vandalism to some of Melbourne's most historically significant civic assets. We've heard about the King George statue, the Pioneer Monument, the Separation Memorial, Captain Cook, and these attacks go well beyond just statues relating to our colonial history. We have also seen in recent times the Police Memorial, which is for officers killed in the line of duty, attacked. We have also seen vandals target the Zelda Deprano statue in front of Trades Hall. Of course, Zelda Deprano was the great campaigner for equal pay for women. And so it is hard to make sense of what is behind these attacks, but it is happening on a level which is very concerning and something which we as a council need to take a stand on. I note that later this year we will unveil a new Stolen Generation memorial on Peppercorn Lawn down on the banks of the Birrarung, and I would hate to see that being targeted as well. So it's really important that we get a very strong message out into the community that if our statues are damaged, if they are vandalised, then the position of the council is very clear. They will be repaired, they will be reinstated. We will not allow the damage to go unrepaired. We will not reward the vandals by allowing their actions to remain, and instead we will respond. The second thing this motion does is makes clear that we need improved protection around our statues and memorials. It's a very sad state of affairs that we're having to debate this, but so we're asking for an audit of CCTV, security guards, fencing, and again, it's very sad that we're having to talk about this here and take these actions. But again, strong action is needed here to protect the decisions of a democratic council and ensure that decisions get made through proper channels, proper means, not through the actions of vandals, actions of the mob. The third thing that this motion does this evening is ask officers to investigate new measures around recovering costs for the damage that has been done, or the cost of repairing the damage that has been done to our statues and memorials. To put it simply, if you break it, you buy it. We want to see action investigated that will allow council to recover costs for the damage caused by the culprits and ensure that that is a new deterrent that is put in place, and also a new principle of fairness that is put in place to ensure that if you break it, you buy it. If you damage these memorials, we will pursue costs against you and see that you contribute to the cost of their repair. In closing, I welcome the contribution of councillors to this debate. I know there are some amendments that are going to be proposed, and I look forward to discussing and debating those as well. As our seconder, Deputy Lord Mayor, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Can I begin by thanking you for your leadership in bringing this motion before the committee tonight? It's actually very sad that this motion needs to be before the committee, but the reality is there has been a significant increase in the number of attacks on statues, a spike in vandalism, including, as you've identified, places like the Police Memorial, in the past year on the fountain in front of the Royal Exhibition Building. These are not only important tributes to people who've made significant sacrifices in this country, they are also beloved memorials that are being targeted, often indiscriminately. And although I find that incredibly troubling, I am grateful to you for your leadership in bringing this motion tonight, Lord Mayor, and sending that very clear message that in the city of Melbourne, if you commit this sort of vandalism, we will repair it and we will come after you for the cost of doing that. I have seen the interview given by the people who allege to be the perpetrators of vandalising the King George statue. And one of the things they say is what they're doing doesn't hurt anybody. They seem to have a view that this is a victimless crime. But it's not a victimless crime, because the reality is it is hurting somebody at a very basic level. It is hurting the ratepayers of Melbourne. Whether you reinstate these memorials or you simply have to do the clean-up job, given some of these memorials have been smashed to the ground, they cannot be left in the state they are destroyed, there is a cost to that. And it's the ratepayers of Melbourne, some of whom are doing it tough, whose dollars are going to that clean-up and that repair. And I struggle to think of a ratepayer who thinks that is a good use of their hard-earned dollars. But importantly, if you think this is a victimless crime, you need to think about what councils do. They do things like provide immunisation services, provide the infrastructure to keep people safe on roads. And instead of spending money on that, they're cleaning up your crime. So anyone who thinks that this sort of vandalism isn't impacting people, isn't impacting communities, needs to take a really hard look at themselves. And if the way they need to do that is being told that they will be held accountable, either through criminal or civil proceedings, well, I hope that is a long overdue wake-up call. So I'm very proud to second this motion, and I commend it to my colleagues.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thank you for your help and assistance in drafting this motion. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Councillor Guest?
Thank you, Nick. Yes, I'd like to speak in support of this motion. Takes me back to the first few months on this council when I was made aware that the Captain Cook statue hadn't been replaced or repaired and had been down for a very lengthy period of time. I received a lot of correspondence. So I look at point 1.2 where it says affirms council position that statues and memorials form part of Melbourne's civic, cultural and historic fabric and should be repaired and reinstated as quickly as possible, which is absolutely true. And I'd like to think that this marks a turning point in this council because clearly in the previous council, whilst this was in the policy, it wasn't being enacted. There was clearly a culture that wanted to see the end of the various, perhaps we call them colonial monuments, and actions or inaction was taking place where action should occur. I received a lot of correspondence. As everyone in this council knows, people were digging in with freedom of information requests, and the council obviously spent a lot of time and resources denying those and slowing them up. But it was very good at the start of last year when we finally got to the bottom of it and realised that this was the policy. And when that was made clear, I think the statue went up 4 days later. So this is a turning point. Well done, Lord Mayor. Well done, Deputy Lord Mayor. This is the way it ought to be, regardless of what we might think of any individual statue or monument. We can't condone people wrecking our society. And you're right, Deputy Lord Mayor, there is a cost. There's always a cost. So I support this wholeheartedly.
Right, if I could ask a question riding on that contribution, if I may, because what 1.2 says is not current policy, or if there is a current policy that does say we must put everything back up as quickly as possible, I haven't been able to find it. I'm aware of the collections management policy from 2002, which simply says to the effect, council is responsible for the maintenance of its collection, and maintenance will be conducted with the advice of conservators, of experts. Those two things are not equivalent to saying everything that's damaged must be reinstated as quickly as possible. Is that correct?
Through you, Lord Mayor, the collection management policy does state that we have a commitment to maintaining and conserving works within the collection to appropriate industry standards. However, it also provides the provision to decommission artworks should they be subject to repeated vandalism or changing cultural significance. The language of the policy is vague and thus subject to interpretation, and we would hope to address this moving forward as part of the Monuments and Memorials review being undertaken.
Thank you, Lauren. So just for clarity's sake, if we adopt this, I'm thinking of the clause number 2 tonight, this is not a restatement of existing policy, but it would be a development or an addition to existing policy, or an interpretation that is not unambiguous in the original.
Councillor, it is subject to interpretation. The policy does state that we have a commitment to maintaining and conserving works within the collection. So it's subject to interpretation how strongly those words are taken.
Thank you.
Do you, Councillor Guest? It has to be a question. Yes, it does.
Councillor Ball, I have no argument with what you've just said. My question is, do you recall at approximately, I think, January, February last year, the executive informing us of words to that effect? You may well be right and it may not be what the policy was at the time, but I remember asking the question if that was the case, and I was informed that that was the case. Do you remember that?
I do recall a discussion of the policy, and I sought to find it preparatory to tonight's debate and could not find any such policy. Lauren brought the 2002 policy to my attention, and that's the closest approximation any of us have come to, but it is not everything must go up as fast as be reinstated as fast as possible. There is no such policy.
I accept that. I'm just saying that's what we were informed at the time.
Yeah, we do need to move on. I think there might be some amendments coming which actually make this cross-questioning that's occurring redundant. So we'll keep pressing on. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak to this motion on the screen before us? Councillor Philip Leilu, could you speak into the microphone so everyone can hear?
I'd like to make an amendment to your motion. So I don't think that was provided to that, and just some minor details before I start that, because I think that's not the right one, and then there'll be ones. 1.2.1. Can you just?
So I don't think that is the amendment that you're proposing to put forward. The document I've got in front of me is a hard copy of what. So perhaps if we could ask somebody to please make sure that the right version goes up.
Yeah. So this is my version that went up. Okay. I note that there will be contributions on this amendment that will potentially allow me to make other amendments that allows potentially a way forward on this, right? So I think 1.2.1, rather than just, it's remove including, so delete 1.2.1.1 and then just finish it off period, space, full stop, and then just bring up the requesting. Yep. Right. The other one is remove 1.4, or 1.3 altogether. Yep. There was a bit of an error. Monuments and Memorial Review Policy. I think, Lauren, that was correct, right? It's the review policy, right? Review. And that was just some of the typos / formatting and everything. So I'd like to move that, and I know there will be comments made, and I know which I have the right to make a second succession amendment. Yes? Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Could I ask a question?
Sure, not a problem.
As part of your amendments that you're putting forward, Councillor Leilu, would you consider amending 1.1? Can we scroll back up? Which currently reads 1.1.1, which currently reads affirms council's position, and in light of the questions from Councillor Ball and the lack of certainty about what the policy currently, or the ambiguity around the current policy, that we remove the word, that you can put forward an amendment that removes the words affirms council position and just put in the word determine that statues and memorials form part of.
Yep.
So that then clarifies the ambiguity, if there was any, in the policy.
So, no, sorry. So that is, so leave 1.1 and then 1.2, replace 1.1.1. That becomes 1.2. So tab it out.
So
delete, yeah.
So I would suggest that,
yeah. And then rather than affirm, it's determine. Determine council's position.
It would just say determine that statues.
Determine
that's
that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's clean.
Yeah.
All right.
So I moved that, and I think there's a seconder.
Please, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Could I just ask Council Business to scroll to the bottom of these amendments? I see there's an amendment to offer amnesty to someone who's committed a criminal offence. I perhaps ask this question of you, David Thompson, in your role of management. does council have the power to offer amnesty to people who have committed criminal offences?
Through you, Lord Mayor, it's my view that council doesn't have the power to offer immunity to any individual who is charged with a criminal offence. It's a matter for the Victoria Police, not for council.
Could I ask a question in light of that advice to Councillor Lei-Lu? Do you still press what is 1.9 on the screen in light of the advice from management that council has no power to do that?
Sure, I'm happy to remove that, strike it through. Yeah. Just strike it through. Yep. Cool.
Wouldn't it just be deleted if you're no longer pressing the amendment? It would just be deleted.
I thought you had to have to do that afterwards.
I'll be guided by council business. Deleted. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. I love that part. But anyway. So I've moved that, and then a seconder.
Sorry, can we just fix in the beginning where it's, I think it's innovate technology. Can we just fix the tense around the language there? Request management to explore innovative techniques. And Lord Mayor, whilst I've got the microphone, can I ask a question?
Please.
Thank you. Councillor Liu.
Sure.
When you reference financially sustainable materials, can I just clarify what you mean? Are you saying use paper mache because it's cheap, or are you saying use titanium because it's durable? Like, what does a financially sustainable material
So
infer?
I'm looking at, rather than spending $500,000 or $1 million on iron, replacing this like for like, there are materials that probably is a lot better. I'm not an expert, but what I'm actually asking is for management to actually consider it all, because at the moment the recommendations back to us is replace it like for like. So if it's iron or brass, we have to do brass. Now I'm saying, well, look, if it's not going to be the exact head that's going to go back, let's look at other ways that it could potentially look like brass, but it might not be. Now, there is a lot of options out there. I don't know, but I would like the team to do that. So that's what I meant by financial sustainable, so that it doesn't break the bank, because technically, if the way we're going, they're destroying, monuments every single month, City of Melbourne pretty much can be broke at the end of the day, right? Anyone else?
Sorry, can I just ask move of the amendment, just scroll down again, because we haven't seen all of the amendments on screen before. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Griffiths, do you have a question in relation to this amendment before we move into debating it?
I think I do, Lord Mayor, although I understand the intent behind the amendments, and we've obviously debating a few concurrently here. In the amendment that you've suggested, Lord Mayor, in changing 1.2 from affirms to determines what the council's position is, i.e. that it is that damage is repaired and reinstated as quickly as possible. When we then get to the question of the monuments and memorials review policy coming back to us, are we asking for potentially a different result out of that? So I guess what I'm asking is this really saying that until April, we're saying this is our policy? And again, I understand the intent. I'm not trying to argue a strange semantic thing. I'm just trying to figure out how these things sequence through.
I might invite Lauren to respond to that, but I've got to say that 1.2, as it currently reads, was my understanding of our current policy, but to the extent that there's ambiguity on that, this makes it clear, and certainly when the report comes back in April, theoretically that report could say anything in relation to the future policy position, and that will be debated at that point in time and agreed or not agreed by councillors. CEO.
Lord Mayor, I just might provide some clarity in relation to the policy. So at the moment we have the memorials and plaques policy, which requires review. It is of an age that it requires review. We also have the collections policy, management policy, which, as we've stated, is was last reviewed quite some time ago. And again, we've heard that it has a level of ambiguity in that policy with respect to its direction around this particular issue. We also have a broader policy position in the asset management strategy that Council has adopted with respect to how we manage our overall asset base and the responsibility to maintain and manage our assets accordingly. So I think the 1.2 as proposed is not setting new policy. It's generally setting the policy that we are acting within, and the ability to come back in April with the Monuments and Memorial Review will enable us to discuss with Council how we might seek to bring the expertise and research that comes from the team and the work that they're doing now, and look at the policy settings that exist and tighten up those policy settings so that there's less ambiguity and more clarity in terms of Council's policy position. So I feel as though the advice that we have given Council with respect to moving on the repair of our monuments and memorials that have been damaged is sound and remains. The only thing that might be different is when we use words such as quickly as possible. Those sorts of phrases aren't necessarily contained within our policies, but I think we are very clear on the intent here. So just to help councillors provide clarity around the advice we've given, where we stand, and the intent of the Monuments and Memorial Review that will be coming back to Council in April.
All right, thank you for that. Councillor Liu, can I ask you a question? If we could just scroll down the screen and just looking at what is now clause 1.8, requesting CO urgently right to Heritage Victoria regarding King George, and after the comma it says, noting leaving it unfixed any longer will be viewed as tolerating the acts of vandalism. Given we've heard that officers have been using best endeavours to try and have that statue repaired, and we're hearing tonight about the further action that is going to occur, could I suggest that from the comma onwards, you remove that from your amendment, and then that is not, could not be open to interpretation as or potentially misinterpretation.
I'm happy to oblige, Lord Mayor, given that you've obliged me on the amendment.
So if that's agreed, then on 1.8 from the comma onwards, just remove the second half of that. There we go.
And I think you had one more.
No,
cost. No? Okay, cool. All right.
I'm
I move this then.
comfortable with that, actually.
Oh, good. I move that, and I'm looking for a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Back to you, Councillor Philip Leilu.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Finally got through that maze of, complexitron, that ECO thing. No, thank you for the effort, and I think really appreciate you bringing forward. If you weren't going to bring up the notice of motion, I definitely was going to, given that it does sit in the arts portfolio, and statues have been destroyed left, right and centre in Melbourne, and that's something that has a fundamental core principle where a city of Melbourne just cannot live with. Do we let law and order run the city, or do we let chaos run the city? Everyone have a political view, but you do not go, if I don't agree with something, I don't go damage something up. I don't go throw something particular up. So that's something that I don't want to discuss. I do have a substantial contribution, which I'll leave when this goes through, but I just want to explain the changes. But mostly, I do think that there is very innovative techniques. I do note that when the Taliban actually blew up one of the biggest Buddha's statues in the cave, there were actually innovative ways to restore that. And that was through lighting, where luckily somebody actually did a scan of the images because of the pictures. So they actually had all the AIs combined and actually created a digital model of the Buddha, to which then they actually projected the lights and it was actually like, at night time. Sadly, it's only been done at night time, but it was a great of what was actually there. So there are technology now. So we have in the age of AI, also lighting and everything we can actually. So there's this way for Lauren and the team to actually explore that. I do appreciate you coming back to us and say, look, we've got to replace brass, but at the same time, there are materials now that look like brass, feels like brass, but it's not brass, and it's a lot cheaper. I would like the team to look at that rather than just a particular one. And I think hopefully that when you go through the Heritage Victoria process, we explained why we should particularly doing that. And obviously financial sustainable because, again, this is one of the main reasons we want to do this because we don't want to bankrupt the council. I also want to look at 1.3, look at new barrier enclosures. So there are a lot of things where there are, just kind of this great white clear through walls that you just surround a particular place. So rather than kind of putting just fences and everything which people can climb over, there are other barriers which you can actually enclose the entire things. So I've seen that around as well. So it would be great to explore that. The monument and so 1.6, if you scroll down a bit, go down, yeah. So 1.6.2. So look, I'm keen to look at the cost because we want to, when we do fix something, but I think when people talk about there is no, as the Deputy Lord Mayor mentioned, there is no, we're not hurting anyone, we're not damaging anyone. No, sorry, there is a cost, and we're talking about a very big number, right? This is something that insurance-wise, we're not going to be able to cover all the time, and that's something that we need to particularly look at. And I think I'm quite saddened by it because it sits within the arts portfolio. The people who are going to be suffering and missing out, because we will be fixing this, it's as a principle. The people who's going to be missing out will be artists. There will be no less exhibitions. There will be less grants for artists. So the more you damage, just know that the more you're damaging the arts community and the arts portfolio, which it sits under. So hence the reason why I want to actually have an idea of the total cost, but also individually broken down, but also hopefully using those innovative methods, we could reduce that overall cost down as well so that we have a final number. And finally, the 1.8, which is the Heritage Victoria, love-hate relationship, Queen Victoria Market. We all know Heritage Victoria's relationship with us on that one. But also, I would like to hope that we can work very well with Heritage Victoria to grant those permits because I do not, and I know the Lord Mayor has asked me to remove that, but I don't want to note that just because us not fixing it means that we tolerate it or we view it as something that, we'll let you get away with it. No, it does not. And so the faster we can get all these permits, and sadly, it's not just actually one now, it's probably going to be a couple of permits that we need because they're all damaged. And finally, the one that was asked to remove, which is the amnesty. Look, I love the idea about reward. I actually did think about it as a reward. However, I didn't want to give financials to people who actually destroyed it. I didn't want them to get any money. So offering amnesty because look, potentially the cost of that is going to be absolutely astronomical, and therefore there is a way which we could potentially work together to say bring back the head, and we could say we're not going to pursue charges, we're not going to do anything. It's wishful thinking on my part, but I'm just putting it out there, trying all these other things before we commit to spending all your ratepayers' money on this. I do hope that whoever's listening, that look, you do return it. I do feel that this is a way of going forward. Enough's enough. It's look, for whatever political reasons, it's something that we can solve out through democracy, not through violence. And if we go down that path, this is not a city that we want to be proud of. So these are the changes I want to make. I appreciate all my councillors for giving feedback and also support. I hope this is a version that we can all support. I know not everyone's going to be able to support it, but I hope this will get the majority, to which then we can move forward going from that, and we can debate the substantials.
Thank you for that, Councillor Philip Leilou. Over to you, Councillor Gladys Liu.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. So first of all, I want to thank you, Lord Mayor and Deputy Lord Mayor, for putting forward this motion. It is an excellent motion because I'm sure a lot of people out there said, yes, we should have done it ages ago. We have waited for far too long. But anyway, we are doing it now. And I also want to thank Councillor Philip Lelou for the thoughts. As you can see, he actually put in a lot of thinking into it, and not only financially, but also the effectiveness. And for the whole thing, I feel that the motion with the amendment, it is making it so much fuller and more complete. So that's why I'm very happy to second this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Would any other councillors like to speak to these amendments? All right, in that case, we will put the amendments. Do you want to? I don't know if you've got to write a reply on amendments. No, okay. Councillor Andreas, do you want to speak to the amendments?
Yes, to the amendment. Could we just scroll up to the top again? Sorry, just very briefly, just stating my intent that I'd like my heritage statues full of heritage. So I don't think I like the idea of 3D printed parts being whacked on as much as I'm a supporter of innovation. I think I'd like to see heritage statues full of heritage.
All right, thank you for sharing your personal views on that. All right, any other speakers to the amendments? No, in that case, I'm going to put the amendments to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Liu, Councillor Guest, Councillor Louis, Councillor Rees, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Leilu, all those against. Councillor Ball, Councillor Rouse. Those amendments have passed. All right, we now move back to the substantive motion with the amendments. You have heard the mover and seconder speak to that motion. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? Councillor Olivia Ball.
Thank you. I'd like to move a further amendment to paragraph 1.2, specifically the first sentence, which has not already been altered by that amendment.
You want to revert it back?
No. I'm not suggesting any change to the amendment that's just been agreed, but the first sentence in paragraph 1.2 has not been substantially altered by what Councillor Leilu just did. The determine has been changed, but I think that was the proponent who changed that. When council business is ready, I can clarify.
If we could just do this in a different colour so that we can keep track of this proposed amendment, please. Oh yeah, that's good. Given it's been accepted, it's now the substantive motion. So that, okay, if we could just do another colour so it's clear.
Yep.
Good.
Ask where that came from. Should be assessed on case code.
I'm proposing this. I've already pre-submitted it to council business, and they're putting it in now as we watch. I've circulated it.
So that's in blue.
It will be
In blue. Right,
in shortly.
And we're voting on that amendment.
Once it's finished, yes.
Gotcha.
Yep. All right.
And it's not quite complete. The rest of that sentence would be deleted. It would replace the remainder of that sentence, not the whole paragraph. Thank you.
All right. So you're moving that amendment, Councillor Ball?
Yes.
All right. Is there a seconder for that amendment?
Can I just ask a quick question before determining that? Just in the original text where it says and should be repaired, is that to be deleted in your proposed amendment?
Yes, I beg your pardon. Yes. That should have been deleted. Yes. Thank you. And there's, and if damaged, yes, so there's an and at the beginning of the second line should be also deleted. Same thing. I can speak to this.
Do we have a seconder for this amendment?
I'm happy to second it so we can hear Councillor Ball's thoughts.
All right, back to you, Councillor Ball.
Thank you. So this is the one fundamental change I would suggest, which is quite different from the original, in distinction from repairing everything that's damaged as quickly as possible. I believe that if something is damaged, it should be assessed on a case-by-case basis, with advice concerning the future of the monument guided by relevant council policies, the extent of the damage, the cost and difficulty of repair, the artistic and historical merit of the artefact, heritage advice, the risk of repeated damage, community sentiment, competing priorities, and other relevant contextual factors. For example, if in the case of the King George, the matter was not repaired as quickly as possible because there was reasonable hope and police advice that the head could be recovered. So that's a very unique, perhaps an unusual, relevant contextual factor which may mitigate against restoring the King George statue straight away at whatever cost, no matter what, when the head is known to be out there and police have hopes of recovering it. So I hope this is a more fleshed out, considered and reasonable approach to responding to damage to monuments, given all of these factors that I think Council and our officers should be taking into account any time a particular incident of damage occurs. I think it is a better approach, more defensible use of our response and better guide to policy that I hope will be coming up in the review. I hope this reflects a considered approach to how we respond to damaged monuments. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Griffiths as seconder.
Thanks, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Dr. Ball for her thoughtful approach here. Part of the reason why I was happy to second this amendment while we're voting for the amendment relates back to that question I asked earlier about the period of time between us making this decision tonight and the return of the Monuments and Memorials Review policy in April, and what is a reasonable thing for us to be doing in the intervening time, whatever it might be, 10 weeks between now and that more thought out, analysed and perhaps more advice being received from officers through that process, which I imagine will come up with a framework. This is not trying to guide officers. This is me imagining what that will have is a more nuanced approach than everything must be repaired as quickly as possible. And so it seems reasonable to me, if there really is only a 10-week intervening period between now and when we get that policy review, that we are then able to effectively wait until we've got that to review which of the many items that may need to be repaired are considered, and obviously taken to the extreme extent what it would mean, again, for the council budget to be undertaking an automatic complete restoration of anything that's destroyed in that time frame before we can receive that more considered piece of work from officers. So I really do look forward to receiving that review policy in April. I was glad to hear both the CEO and the Lord Mayor's comments around what that would mean and might consider, and it seems reasonable to me to wait until we've received that, which would then allow us to consider on a case-by-case basis how we approach each of the monuments that have been damaged or may be damaged in the future.
All right, Councillor Phil Lalou.
Thank you. I won't be able to support this. I think I hear the comments about waiting for the review, coming back, and everything. We've already waited a year. If anything, we actually waited longer because I was asking last term, the moment that the statue is destroyed, I wanted to repair it, not because I care about King George or colonialism or anything. It was the fact that this was a part of Melbourne that you're carving out. It's a piece of Melbourne that somebody has taken and has not returned. And that is something that I cannot stand. We talk about the fact that we need to wait because he could potentially come back. In time that the head has been severed, more monuments has been either destroyed or been attacked, and the frequency of that has just increased, right? So that's why I put it on which then I think the Lord Mayor said, can we remove that? I do feel that there is a public perception that, well, City of Melbourne is not fixing, the first one we did damage. So you know what? We're going to go and destroy more because they're not going to do anything about it. So therefore, that is our way to make our statement. That is our way of saying, we believe we're right, but it's not, right? And so if we give in to that, we might as well all go home. I mean, there's no point for us to even just sit here and debate it. I hate to say it, but you don't negotiate with terrorists, right? Because otherwise you would actually end up just not getting the benefit. We are here to act for the people of Melbourne. We are here as custodians of future generations so that we can have more things. There are ways and mechanisms to do this. We have waited. We have given them things. I even try to give them amnesty, right, until April, right? That's something that I would never even want to do. But for the interest of seeing it return and everything, I'm willing to do that because I want to see it return. But we cannot wait anymore. And if it means that we just sell everything to fix it, purely based on principle of democracy, we are correct, right? We got to do this. Otherwise, there will just be chaos. And I was actually going to raise this in a substantial debate, but there is a culture war going out there, right? I mean, we are seeing, it's like tit for tat at the moment. And so at the moment we don't fix this, we leave it as it is, it's inviting more and more people. I think it's going to be the point where who can destroy the more statues, who can vandalize more, who can put more outrageous sign on it. And so I don't want that. I want to restore it back to it is. I want to protect it. Let's then go through a different process to actually acknowledge that, and let's go to do the right way. So I won't be supporting this.
I'm going to speak to this matter as well. I can't support this amendment either. And to be really clear, this is not a debate tonight about the virtues of King George versus the police memorial versus Zelda Deprano, the campaigner for women's wage justice. There's a really clear principle that we're debating tonight, and it's you will not achieve change by damaging property. It's how we operate as a city and as a democratic city. So I understand the intention here, and I respect the intention of this amendment, but this is not a moment for nuance and caveats. It's a moment for clarity. If you break it, we will fix it. If you topple it, we will reinstate it, and what's more, we'll make you pay for it. It's time for clarity. So I can't support this amendment with the nuance and the caveats and all that comes with it.
Lord Mayor,
Lord Mayor.
Sorry, we're in a debate now, so Councillor
I have
Guest,
a question, if I could.
Okay.
So my question is to you, Lord Mayor. So if in the instance, the real example of the King George statue, the police said, we think we can catch these people, we've seen evidence that the head still exists and is in circulation in the community, we think we can get it for you, we need time, you need to give us time, your response would be, no, we're going to repair it anyway. This is what you're suggesting in your version. Is that correct?
Well, the King George statue head was removed over a year ago, and so...
So if the police said, okay, in another hypothetical situation, something is stolen, the police say, we think we can recover it, your position would be, too bad, we're going to pay to replace it, no matter what the police have advised.
My position is, at this moment in Melbourne, what is needed is absolute clarity. And so introducing complexity like this at this time is not the right course. We do have a policy coming back in April. We'll see what Melbourne looks like at that point in time. But right now, the highest priority is clarity. All right.
Might I also ask a question? Sorry, Councillor Guest. A question, I think, for the CEO, and recognising this might be a difficult one. At the moment, later on in this motion, we request information on what the cost to repairs would be, but effectively, if we're passing 1.2 as it currently is, we're undertaking to do those repairs regardless of what the budget implication might be. So my question is, do you have any figure in mind at the moment, or does anyone in management have the capacity to advise us how much money we're effectively spending by passing this motion tonight?
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, for your question, and through you, Lord Mayor. A number of things are on my mind. Number one is the collections are insured, so we would be exercising our insurance policy in order to be able to undertake those repairs. I would be mindful around the potential impact of our premium based on multiple claims on that insurance, but that would be a budgetary question and something we would bring back to you as part of our annual plan and budgeting processes in terms of what the likely or potential, if any, but implications are on the premium that we are paying. I'd also be mindful around if we were making decisions where we weren't choosing to exercise our insurance but rather undertake those repairs ourselves within the budgets that have been set by Council, that we would ensure that we would stay within those budgets as per requirements under our delegations. And if there was an instance whereby in order to be able to effect the resolution, if passed this evening, it would mean that certain operational budgets were impacted, then I would be obligated to bring that forward to Council for further consideration. So I feel that what is being proposed is achievable, and if there were financial impacts that needed to be considered by Council, I would proactively bring that before you for your consideration. That's probably my answer, in terms of not being able to go away and have a deeper thought about it. But I think that's, I have a general level of comfort in terms of what's being proposed in the substantive motion. Back to you, Lord Mayor.
All right, thank you, CEO. All right, so does anybody else wish to speak to this proposed amendment by Councillor Ball? Please, Councillor Guest. Yep.
Be very quick because you've in fact summarised what I was going to say. I don't think this amendment is in keeping with your words earlier, Nick, Lord Mayor, which you've reiterated. Our statues and monuments, whether we like them or not, have been put up over time through the democratic process, and we're never going to love everything, but we don't go around vandalising our property. And I also don't think this amendment is in keeping with Alison, our CEO's statement, regardless of what the nuances of the policy and the wording might have been. The intent now is to make sure that we maintain, repair our monuments as quickly as feasible. And the last point I was going to make, which Alison, I think you nailed in the end, the financial aspect here. Should something cost a lot more than one might have expected, you have a delegation schedule. You have to follow it, as do other senior managers here. We talked about that at the end of last year. There are some very strict thresholds there. So should you reach those, you will automatically come back and tell us that such and such a bomb blast perhaps that had gone off in the museum is going to cost more than $2 million. It will come back to council, but it's all, the safeguards are already in place, is what I'm getting at. So, yeah, I don't support this amendment. I understand the concerns, but we already have policies in place to ensure that that isn't the case, that we'll be informed.
All right, does anybody else wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Rouse.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. Anyone who's heard me speak in the chamber knows I am a fan of good governance, and I am sympathetic to the intent of what the motion is trying to say, but I am yet to be convinced that vandalism of art is a good trigger for this process, nor is that a good governance in that sense as well. I think it's important that as a city there is mechanisms to have these debates, but I don't think it is good governance that begins with vandalism of public art. So I don't think I can support the amendment on the screen.
All right. Will any other councillors want to speak to the motion, the amendment? No, in that case, I'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, Councillor Ball, Councillor Griffiths. All those against, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Leilua, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Louis, Councillor Guest, Councillor Liu. The amendment has failed. Could we revert back to the previous text?
And while you're at it, I think 1.5.1 and 1.6.2, it should be 1.5.2.
Thank you, Councillor Leilua.
So it'll be 1.5.2 and then 1.6 afterwards. I'm surprised it hasn't made the computer crash yet. Yep. And then, yep, and determine that statues and memorial form. Okay, that should be right. I think so.
All right, so we now revert back to the original, the amended substantive motion. And are there any councillors who are yet to speak on this motion before us who wish to speak now? Councillor Leilua.
Thank you, and thank God we actually got through all of that. But that's how democracy works, right? So we might not agree with everything, but at least we have that debate here and we actually got through it. I'll be very quick because, so the reason I'm putting the change is because, as I said, there's a couple of things. This sits within the arts portfolio, right? And the budget is $200,000 to fix, damages and everything. And so, when we talk about, when fixing as soon as possible, if it's 180,000, then at least it's within our budget. But that doesn't have any budget to fix the other monuments and all the other things. And so we are essentially spending all of that in that. And when we go over it, other parts of, I guess, the budget is actually going to be spent. So, it's in arts. So maybe next time, if it does say, let's hypothetically cost $2 million, well, that's something that probably art portfolio is actually going to end up putting. So what does that mean, right? That's going to mean cutting of more programs. It means cutting grants. It means cutting other things. And then that's going to affect all the other budgets. It could actually affect community services. It could actually affect business grants or anything like that. And so when we say that this is not hurting anyone and this is not costing anything, no, it is. There is a hidden cost from that. And while people might not think, enjoy, and say, I did the right thing, you're not. You're actually disadvantaging others. And so I cannot stand with that. The other one I was talking about was I don't believe that, we've got to stop this culture war. Let's leave that for, others to fight. We just got to protect our own asset. If somebody attacked Town Hall, right, we should be the ones that defend Town Hall because we are the ones that are represented here. We wouldn't let anyone else destroy Town Hall. We wouldn't let anyone else smash the window. We wouldn't let anyone take the dog. Actually, someone actually did take the dog before, this dog statue before, but we actually we replaced it. We have a history of when things get destroyed, we do replace it, and it's good governance is based on, and it's something that we got to continue going forward. I've also spoken with a lot of First Nations communities and Aboriginals. They're actually split on this as well. There is actually ones who actually go, I actually want to keep the statue because it reminds people of the hurt and everything that's done to us, right? There are those who definitely say, no, I don't want it. But then there are others who go, I want it there because I want people remind people of the hurt and damage. And so when you can't even get, a consensus on this, it's something that I cannot, it's a greater debate for this. But what we can do is replace it, and that is what we have been doing. It's been far too long. It's about time. We should just get on with it.
All right, thank you, Councillor Philip Lay. Do any others speak to the standing motion? Councillor Olivia Ball.
Thank you. I would just, I will not be supporting this motion. I would just urge my colleagues to consider the possibility that reinstating damaged statues is an incentive rather than a deterrent. That is a possibility. So the assumptions that have been repeated here are that we can't reward people doing damage by not reinstating these statues. I don't know. I can't speak for the people doing it. We don't know who they are. We don't know their mind. But do not just assume that putting these things back up will be a deterrent. It could be quite the opposite, an invitation to have another go, because it is reinstating the symbols that they appear to abhor. So with that, I think this is a fool's errand, and I'll not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Ball. Any other speakers to the motion? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillor Rouse, Councillor Leilou, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Louis, Councillor Guest, Councillor Liu. All those against? Councillor Ball. Any councillors abstaining? Councillor Griffiths. All right, that motion has passed. And that, I believe, concludes general business. And I therefore ask the question, are there any items of urgent business? I do not believe there is. So we move on to public questions. Agenda item 9. Another 15-minute period has been set aside for members of the public to ask questions. I believe we didn't get through all our questions at the start of the meeting. Chris Thrum, your question was to be next on that list. So if you still wish to ask that question, I invite you to the lectern. Thank you for sitting through our meeting. I'm sure you know a lot more about AI and data centres and statues than you did at the start. Or maybe not.
Maybe. Not. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Okay. So, thank you, Lord Mayor and councillors, management team, viewers. This is for the local music venues. We need to bring in live music parking permits, I believe. Live music venues in the City of Yarra and the City of Port Phillip, in partnership with Music Victoria, offer specialised parking permits that allow performers to use nearby loading zones to drop off and pick up equipment. These permits help reduce the risk of a parking fine for musicians loading heavy gear in inner city Melbourne. Could the Lord Mayor and the City of Melbourne consider working in partnership with Music Victoria to introduce a similar policy of transferable parking permits for registered music venues in the City of Melbourne?
I might see if our arts lead, Philip Leilou, wants to respond.
Ni hao ma.
Okay. Over to you.
Parking and arts, two of my favourites. So I think management's response is reviewing and communicating flexible parking solutions for musicians is an action under the City of Melbourne's live music venues roadmap. We do have 15 minutes free in regardless of loading zone or parking for businesses to actually unload and everything. So I think the question will be, I'm actually keen to look at, is 15 minutes enough for some, right? So if it's not enough, then maybe that's something that we could potentially look at. But at the moment, one of the reasons we have that 15 minutes was because I remembered it because I fought very, very hard for it in exchange for the increase in parking fine. In parking revenue, and also for the Sunday no longer free car parking. But the reason that we had the 15 minutes was because data actually showed that for business to unload and everything, it takes 15 minutes. Now, if a musician it takes longer, then we would like to know how long it takes and also in what particular area. I think parking permits, I think that's something we can look at, but I do note that at the moment it's only for residents. We just need to better understand how long it actually takes. And if it doesn't take too long, then I don't think having those parking permits is being particularly needed.
To be clear, could I have a follow-up question, Lord Mayor? Yes. Thank you. Well, in consideration of the fact that the businesses and business owners have the right to vote in the council election and not just residents, could they have equitable rights as the residents?
Business actually able to vote, and sometimes they actually... Sorry? Are you talking about parking permits?
Yeah, I'm talking about in terms of you're saying residents have rights for parking permits, right?
Yeah, so in certain areas of the city, they have actually residential parking, which we offer, and there are most of the times we don't because they have parking within the building. But business, we have made a policy that, for example, in South Bank, we don't actually support a lot of the. We actually do reduce parking within South Bank to limit it to no longer to residents. So some of the residents in South Bank don't actually have parking. So it's a need for basis on particular areas.
Okay, well, we're looking for consideration to parallel the City of Yarra and the City of Port Phillip in regards to venues getting the facility to offer musicians who are performing.
Sure.
Yeah, that's so you guys get the
Happy
gist
to
of
look
that.
at it, Chris.
Yeah, and if you could work with Music Victoria to advance that forward.
Not a problem. I'll put it on the portfolio. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks you for your interest in this area and loving the Midnight Oil rock tea that you are sporting.
And Varley Rob Hurst.
Indeed. And long live Nick Cave. What a concert that was. Do we have any other questions in the time left before us? Fana, I have the feeling you have a question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor and councillors. I'm very encouraged by the noises that have been made by councillors tonight about pursuit of excellence, saving costs and ratepayers. Council is aware that both fruit and vegetable traders and the council's market management company agree that waste management charges are already included as a component of traders' rents. This is a fact that's not in contention. Traders flatly refuse to have the company rely on a market rule that allows for a service or utility to be charged separately, to be interpreted by them as permission to charge twice for the same service or utility. That is simply unfair and unethical. Because traders can see that council's company is in dire financial straits, they volunteered to identify cost savings in waste management for the company, who wouldn't work with people who volunteer their business skills to help you make substantial savings. Our proposals, if adopted, could have led to savings in the amount of approximately $290,000. Some of the lowlights of working with your company were that traders had to strike twice to get the company to come to the table. The executives complained about the work time spent following leads that would bring about possible savings, and I asked council what business complains about work done to affect significant ongoing savings. The company resisted the proposal to direct organic waste to starving farm animals to support farmers, and traders had to work with the farmers to find out about EPA and Farmers Federation approvals. Even then, the traders had to embarrass the company by writing to councillors and effectively expose them. The council refused to allow traders to look at any other possible waste savings in other streams other than 3 waste streams, and in fact even refused to disclose what other waste streams were. Council needs to make cost savings across the municipality in these difficult times. Council would be better served by a market manager energised and excited to identify cost-saving opportunities at the market. Traders do not believe it is necessary to double charge for waste and seek an opportunity to work with people who understand that trying to extract more and more money from fewer and fewer traders will simply bring about a swift demise of the public market. Traders are business people committed to the market. They're determined to continue their industrial activities to prevent the imposition of unfair and unreasonable charges. And while this sounds very negative, I want to reassure councillors that traders are willing to work directly with council if council has similarly motivated people. So the question is council prepared to work directly with traders to achieve waste management savings so that these additional charges become unnecessary?
All right, thank you, Fana, for that question, and thank you for waiting several hours to get the opportunity
Sorry,
to
it went way over
ask
the
it.
90 seconds.
So we gave you some indulgence at that point. And I might see if one of our officers wants to respond to Fana's questions about will council intervene in regards to the issues that she has identified.
Thank you, Fana, for your question, and thank you, Lord Mayor. I might take a large portion of that on notice and come to you, Fana, and have a bit of a further conversation around
Thank you,
some of your concerns. And, you know, I am across the issue. I understand the work that's been done to engage with farmers to explore alternative ways of disposing of pellets, all of those sorts of things. So I think the best thing I can do is just have the conversation rather than sort of give a carte blanche indication of whether we'll intervene or not. So right. I'll undertake to do that and be in contact.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well, look, on behalf of councillors, welcome your offer to meet directly with Fana to discuss the matter she's raised. All right. Any further questions, Fana?
Can I? This is a very short one.
Let's try and keep it short if you can.
This one's very short.
We've all been here for several hours.
Nope, very short. Council's governance protocols for wholly owned subsidiary companies had an effective start date of May 2023 and is able to be reviewed every 2 years or whenever necessary. And given the governance issues that traders have brought to council over the last 12 months, ranging way beyond financial matters. Traders are interested to know whether Council will undertake to do an immediate review of those governance protocols.
Thank you, Fana, and through you, Lord Mayor. It is part of our practice and it is good governance to be reviewing our wholly owned subsidiary protocols as well as our constitutions for our subsidiaries on a regular basis, and we have been proactively doing that and looking at that, the need to do that work in a more proactive way than perhaps it's been done in the past. We are looking and turning our mind to those matters, and I think, you know, it's a part of a conversation that I'd like to have with the Council in terms of the timing and prioritisation of that work, but just to reassure you that we are aware of the need to do that in a timely manner and on a regular basis, and you know, it is appropriate that that occur for the Queen Victoria market in the near future.
Thank you.
We still have time available for public questions. I don't think anybody else has any further to ask of us, so therefore we move on to agenda item 10, closure of the open meeting. And after 3 hours and 26 minutes, I wish to thank members of the public for their interest and their attendance and declare this meeting closed at 8:56 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody.